Chapter 282. The speed at which Long Do's head lowered was very, very slow. This allowed Dunia to clearly feel that the warm aura was approaching her. Moreover, if they continued to get close to each other, the result would be their lips being pressed together. Wait. This. Dunia didn't expect Ryuto to do this, so her little face suddenly turned red, and her body slightly trembled. But, damn it! Don't look down on me! But in order to show her maturity as a mature woman, Dunia didn't turn away. Instead, she forced herself to pout and prepared to throw her first kiss. Chirp. But in the next moment, Ryuto's head slid up, and his lips kissed Dunia's forehead. When she realized that this guy kissed her forehead, Dunia's trembling finally stopped, as if she was suddenly relieved. Don't be stubborn. After feeling the girl's embarrassment, Ryuto turned over and lay down on the side, and laughed. You're not ready at all. Among the three harem, Dunia was obviously the most afraid of this kind of thing, because she was ignorant about the relationship between men and women, and fear came from the unknown. But the other two women weren't like this. Colored Glaze took the initiative to force a kiss, and Yunyen took the initiative to seduce and ask for a kiss. In comparison, Dunia, who was trembling like a little rabbit about to be eaten by a big bad wolf, was indeed not ready. After realizing this point, Dunia was speechless, because she couldn't refute this point. This is also the reason why I don't plan to marry you so soon. As Ryuto said, he reached out and stroked Dunia's waterfall-like silver hair, as if he was stroking this little bear's fur. In a relationship between a man and a woman, both sides must be ready. If you're not ready, and I force you, it will only cause you to be traumatized, and you won't be able to fully devote yourself to it in the future, understand? Unlike usual, Ryuto's tone was very serious, and obviously he wasn't teasing. Although Ryuto was a pervert who liked women, and even prepared to start a harem, he had always been the type of person who liked both sides, and he hated Torrens and forced people the most. If he couldn't make his woman be willing to be intimate with him, then even if he got her, it would be meaningless. Dunia was in such a situation. Hearing this, Dunia couldn't help but raise her head slightly, looked at Ryuto's serious expression that was different from usual, and asked, then, what about Colored Glaze and Yunyen? Have you been intimate with them? About that, I have, but not completely. Ryuto didn't hide his relationship with Colored Glaze and Yunyen to Dunia. In the past few months, he often went out with the two, and it was normal for them to be intimate and hug each other. After all, this was a relationship that naturally happened when love was strong. However, this kind of intimacy stopped there, because Yunyen's father, Kyoji, had recently returned, and Yunyen had also returned to the Tsukuminari villa to stay with her family, so Ryuto didn't have the chance to go further with her. As for Colored Glaze, there was no need to mention it. Rue Hui had repeatedly warned him not to take Colored Glaze's virginity, so Ryuto didn't have the guts to make a move on her for the time being. So from the current situation, Ryuto, Colored Glaze, and Yunyen had only reached B in ABC, and the final C hadn't arrived yet. After listening to this explanation, Dunia was first stunned, then a feeling of not wanting to admit defeat slowly rose in her heart. During this period, Dunia more or less developed a sense of competition for the two women, because she actually saw Ryuto being intimate with Yunyen and Colored Glaze. The scene where Ryuto and Yunyen were intimate was in school. At that time, it was still lunch break on the rooftop. Ryuto and Yunyen often ate there, and Dunia sometimes also went to join in the fun. Just a week ago, Dunia forgot to bring food, so she went to the welfare department to buy a bunch of bread, and hurriedly ran to the rooftop. Who knew that when she opened the door, she would hear such a voice? Don't mess around, we're in school. What are you afraid of? No one will come here. Hee, I think so. Hearing the two's conversation, Dunia quietly slipped to the door and opened it a crack, widening her eyes to look inside, and saw the extremely shocking scene. Ryuto and Yunyen were hugging and kissing by the wall. That action was really too shameless, at least in Dunia's eyes. The two old foxes made out with each other for a full 5 minutes before letting go. Dunia, who was hiding behind the door, blushed. After all, this was the first time she had seen such a thrilling reality show. So, they would do this kind of thing in private? But when she thought of Yunyan's mature behavior and age of graduation, Dunya comforted herself by thinking, it's okay, Yunyan is special, as long as it's not with colored glaze. But who knew, a few days later, Dunya saw Ryuto and colored glaze being sweet in the Rulong Group headquarters. It was a green bamboo forest. That day, school was on holiday, so Dunya came to look for Ryuto to play, but she didn't expect that someone was already one step ahead of her. Miss Colored Glaze, it's been hard for you to manage the Black Hand Alliance. Humph, you just found out? My shoulders are sore now, massage them properly, okay? Under the gaze of Dunya, who was hiding in the dark, Colored Glaze sat under the shade of the bamboo forest and let someone massage her shoulders. But as they pressed against each other, they somehow ended up kissing each other. They kissed for a full 5 minutes before letting go. If Yunyan and Ryuto had such intimate actions, it would be fine, but Colored Glaze was also here. And she didn't feel any more distant than Yunyan? Seeing the two of them hugging and whispering after kissing, Dunya, who was secretly watching from afar, felt her eyes burning. She felt that there was a patch of lush green above her head, just like the Hulunba Plains. Speaking of which, Dunya definitely liked Ryuto. But just as Ryuto thought, she could accept playing around with Ryuto and even sleeping together, but she couldn't accept such intimate actions. But after seeing Yunyan and Lioli open a new door one after another, Dunya felt like she was a pitiful creature who had been thrown outside the door. She could only watch the three of them being intimate with each other. That feeling was terrible. As the saying goes, don't worry about scarcity, but worry about inequality. She was already holding back her anger after seeing Ryuto being intimate with Yunyan and Colored Glaze. Then, Ryuto said those words that seemed to be mocking her for not being feminine, so it was no wonder that Dunya was so angry. So she reached out and grabbed Ryuto's collar, and asked seriously, let me ask you a question. Am I really not feminine? It's okay, as long as you're lowly. Lowly? What the hell is lowly? The moment she heard this, Dunya couldn't help but explode. That's the feeling. But Ryuto smiled and pulled her into his arms, and said with a smile, it doesn't matter whether you're feminine or not. What's important is that you're very cute, very pure, and very straightforward. This is your unique taste, and I like you very much. You don't have to compare other things with Yunyan and Colored Glaze. I'm cute, very pure, very straightforward. After being held in the arms of this man and being caressed on the back, and hearing these obviously great compliments, Dunya's face suddenly turned red, and her slightly stiff body also became soft. It had to be said that although Ryuto's nerves were thick, with his current high IQ, it wasn't difficult for him to coax a mere Dunya. After a few words of coaxing and a hug, the girl's little face that had been pulled down suddenly relaxed, and her temperament gradually changed back to that of a cute and lively little loli. But even so, she still raised her head and asked, do you really think that I'm good like this? Of course it's good. This little face is so cute. But I want to be better. I don't want to lose to Colored Glaze and Yunyan. I want to be the best in your heart. Perhaps it was because she was in her hometown, or perhaps it was because of the change in her mentality, Dunya unconsciously spoke her mind. Which girl didn't want to be the best in their lover's heart? Although Colored Glaze, Yunyan, and Dunya had basically accepted the situation of the three women coexisting, they naturally had their own little plans in their hearts, and they all hoped that Ryuto would favor only one of them. Although she hadn't officially become Ryuto's lover, Dunya still had such thoughts, so she had been troubled over how to let Ryuto feel her personal charm. Is that so? That's really great. Ryuto heard this and revealed a happy smile, then asked, then what does the lovely Dunya plan to do? Hee. Ryuto was actually just casually asking, who knew that Dunya directly got up from the bed, put on her shoes and socks, and took out a small package from the suitcase. Let's go. After taking out the small package, Dunya pulled Ryuto up from the bed and walked straight to the door. Go. Where are we going? To a place where I can show my personal charm. A place where you can show your personal charm. The zoo. You're looking for death. Don't you know how to talk? What the hell is a zoo? Puff. Suddenly, Dunya couldn't help but punch Ryuto's stomach, and he almost spat out the Russian-style cream bun he just ate. However, although he was beaten, Ryuto's mood was still very good, because the awkward Dunya from before was gone, and the cute, headless silver bear was back. In this way, although he didn't know where Dunya was taking him, Ryuto smiled and followed behind, wanting to see what kind of surprise this girl was going to bring him. Chapter 283. Dunya dragged Zhang Zian to a restaurant for dinner. It was already night time. As night fell, the two of them walked on the streets of Moscow. Not long after, a majestic building appeared in front of them. Anyone who lived in Moscow knew that this was the Moscow Lavsky Music Theater, built during the pre-Soviet period. It was one of the most famous theaters in Moscow. The Moscow Lavsky Ballet Troupe, which resided in this theater, was one of the top ballet troupes in the Northern Kingdom and even the world. Ever since their chief dancer, Overa Kaldis, retired more than 10 years ago, the ballet company's reputation was not as enthusiastic as before. However, it was still full of people every time it performed. It was known as the representative of the highest level of ballet in Moscow. It was now past 9 o'clock. Since there were no performances scheduled in the theater today, there were few lights in the theater. There were not many pedestrians nearby, so it seemed empty and quiet. From the outside, the Lavsky Theater was a typical, Baroque architecture. The pink brick walls and the decorative columns set off each other. On the one hand, one could strongly feel the traditional historical traces and rich cultural heritage. At the same time, the overly complicated texture and decoration were abandoned, and the unnecessary cumbersome lines were simplified. In the courtyard outside the theater, there were recently posted promotional posters for the performance. In the posters, handsome men and beautiful women in beautiful ballet costumes were posing in various elegant postures. It was as if one would be immersed in the wonderful performance at a glance. After arriving at the entrance of the theater, Dunya tilted her head at Ryuto. She did not walk to the gate guarded by the guards. Instead, she went to a corner not far away, grabbed a water pipe, and threw herself nearly 5 meters up. From a third person's point of view, Dunya's move just now was like flying. She flew lightly to the balcony on the second floor, grabbed the railing, and flipped up. Almost in the blink of an eye, she arrived at the rooftop of the third floor. Ever since she was poisoned by the hell butterfly a few months ago and gained a level 5 superhuman physique, Dunya's skills had been rapidly developing in a direction that was unlike that of a human. She had even tried to climb the 200-meter-high Tokyo Emperor Hotel with her bare hands. With only 2 fingers, she could support her body weight of nearly 150 kilograms, as if she was a young Spider-Man who moved the wall at a right angle as if it were flat ground. Seeing Dunya suddenly jumping over the wall, Ryuto also jumped over the wall and entered the theater from the top of the third floor. Was this the place Dunya wanted to bring me to? She seemed familiar with this place? While Dunya moved forward with familiarity, Ryuto, who was following behind, curiously observed the scene inside the theater. On the other hand, he was curious about Dunya's goal. The interior color scheme of this Moscow Lavsky Music Theater was Mediterranean-style blue and white. It looked very fresh and comfortable, making people feel as if they were rippling in a wonderful art sea. Soon, the two quietly came to the theater's main stage, which was the most important area of the theater. Because today was a closed day, there was no one on the main stage, and the lights were not turned on. Dunya, on the other hand, went to the main stage and turned on the lights, letting the spotlights above illuminate the dark world. Whoa, whoa, whoa. This is so beautiful. When the lights were turned on, Ryuto couldn't help but show a surprised expression, because this was the first time he saw such a beautiful theater. The main stage of Moscow Lavsky Music Theater could only be considered medium-sized in terms of scale. There were hundreds of chairs on the first floor and the second floor respectively. The chairs were arranged in a semicircle around the stage, looking like a huge fish pond. Compared to the simple and elegant main color scheme, the huge stage curtain was extremely luxurious. The luxurious dark gold color and the theater's royal blue color were mixed together, presenting an impressive stage view. Wait here for a while, I'll be right there. After putting Ryuto in the empty first row of the auditorium, Dunya took her small bag and walked to the small side door next to the stage. That was where the actors went on stage. Naturally, there was no one inside the actors' lounge. Actors' lounge? No way. Is Dunia going to dance for me? Lin Sanjiu thought. Looking at the girl taking a small bag and walking over there, Ryuto couldn't help but think of Dunia's background. Her mother, Olivia Caldas, was a world-famous ballet artist. Logically, Dunia should be a girl with artistic genes. But he didn't know if it was because Wu Hong's fighting genes were too strong. Although Dunia inherited her mother's beauty, she had almost no artistic achievements. The ballet that her mother was proud of also had not been performed for a long time. So does Dunia still know how to dance? He didn't know. At least in the original Red Album 2, No One Survived, she didn't dance in front of the player. But now that Dunia deliberately brought Ryuto back to the place where her mother became famous, it seemed like she wanted to prove something to Ryuto. In this kind of curious and excited waiting, it didn't take long before a particularly eye-catching figure under the stage lights finally appeared in front of Ryuto. Oh, this is... When he saw Dunia, who purposely changed into a ballet dress, Ryuto almost exclaimed because she looked so beautiful right now. The tight-fitting ice blue ballet dress perfectly depicted the beautiful and slender figure of a 16-year-old girl. The short skirt that was as thin as a cicada's wings when moving was graceful and light like a blooming flower. Together with the white silk pants and pointed shoes that highlighted her slender legs, it was even more beautiful. At this time, the girl standing in the middle of the stage elegantly raised her neck slightly, like a swan proudly swearing an oath. Her silver silk-like shiny hair was tied into a mature ponytail behind her back. Then the girl stretched her arms, tiptoed, and before Ryuto could react, she had already started dancing. There was only the girl on the huge and empty stage, and there was no music or dance accompaniment. She just moved her graceful body according to the rhythm in her heart, like a silver-white butterfly fluttering in the air, or like a leaf swaying in the air. Of course, Dunia knew how to dance. How could she not know how to dance? She was the daughter of Elvira Caldas, the continuation of the life of a lady who deeply engraved art and elegance into her bones. She was born to be a dancer. So light. Her body was so light, as if she could do anything easily. Although Dunia hadn't danced for a long time, her exaggerated physical fitness brought about strong control that perfectly covered up her unfamiliarity. She was dancing in the middle of the dance floor. Her beautiful dance was graceful and gentle, her body was as light as the wind, and her posture was wonderful beyond compare. Her agile toes danced elegantly in the air, as if time and space were blurred, making the theater return to the time when the Princess of the North was still present. If there were old audiences who had seen Elvira's dance in the past, when they saw the situation on the stage, they would definitely be shocked to the point of tears. Not only did the girl have a graceful dance, but her dance skills were still moving even though she wasn't skilled. Her temperament was comparable to that of an angel, and it almost perfectly restored Elvira's posture. She lightly tapped her toes, and her slender feet drew an arc on the floor, as if there were layers of ripples in the water. Then, she raised her hands high above her head, slightly closed, and twirled her fingers, like a budding flower that was slowly blooming. Finally, the girl tapped her feet and stood upright, taking small steps, and suddenly jumped. Through a high jump of 720 degrees, she displayed the beauty of the flowing lines in the circle to her heart's content. After this high jump, the girl's speed became faster and faster, and her movements became more and more intense. It even gradually went beyond the category of dance, and evolved into martial arts. Every time her slender feet touched the ground, it would create a strong wind, as if it was going to sweep a ditch on the ground. When her slender waist and arms stretched back gracefully, it was as if the air on the stage was about to disperse. Even so, it still wasn't martial arts, because if these movements were called martial arts, it would be too elegant, and people would unknowingly be intoxicated by it. In this world, where would there be a martial arts that people couldn't take their eyes off, as if their hearts were spinning along with it? But in this world, where would there be such a dance that was full of power and speed, as if it could shatter the dance floor in the next moment? Movement and stillness, elegance and wildness, harmony and violence. These completely opposite essences, as Dunia's body continued to dance in the middle of the stage, and people could feel the strange beauty of countless contradictions colliding and merging together. This was a ballet, and it wasn't a ballet. This was a martial arts performance, and it wasn't a martial arts performance. This was a performance, and it wasn't a performance. This was a duel, and it wasn't a duel. What was this? Dunia herself didn't know. But this was her. This was the daughter of the princess of the Northern Kingdom and the warrior of the Far East, showing her most beautiful, most authentic, and most charming self in front of the man she cared about the most. Too beautiful. When Dunia finished her dance and walked towards the audience, Ryuto was still immersed in her beautiful figure and elegant temperament. Especially compared to the careless and boorish Dunia, who was usually careless and rude. Right now, her body was exuding a strange beauty with a strong contrast. It was the perfect embodiment of a young girl's soul-stirring charm. How is it? Now, do I have the charm of a woman? After coming to Ryuto's side, Dunia shook her sweat-stained hair and asked in a confident tone. Yes. Too many. Seeing Dunia like this, for the first time, Ryuto had the urge to hug her tightly, kiss her, and completely dominate this little princess. And in the next second, he did just that. Chapter 284. Before Dunia could react, a large hand had already wrapped around her slender waist and pulled her body into his embrace. In the next second, the girl's body, which was wrapped in a tight dance dress, was pressed against Ryuto's body. Their cheeks were also very close. The stage's spotlight almost couldn't shine on the audience, so Ryuto and Dunia were in a slightly dim space. After pulling Dunia closer, Ryuto held her slender waist with one hand and placed the other hand on her beautiful back. A beautiful and charming back must be snow-white and well-proportioned. The back of Dunia's ballet dress was half hollowed out, through which one could feel the beautiful and smooth texture of her back. For the first time, Ryuto felt such a strong charm from the girl's body. After her unique outfit and the special dance just now, Dunia seemed to have sublimated, becoming the most fascinating combination of angel and demon under the spotlight. Especially at such a close distance, her beautiful and sweet face was flawless, pure to the point that it didn't contain any impurities. Her skin was as white as snow, and her plump and delicate little mouth was slightly open, emitting an alluring aura. This beautiful scene really made Ryuto's blood boil. He didn't care that they were still in the theater, but he couldn't help but lean down and kiss Dunia's soft and smooth cherry lips. With this kiss, Dunia's eyes suddenly widened, but there wasn't much surprise in her eyes. Instead, there was a strange mixture of excitement and accomplishment. Humph humph humph. Very good, just like that. You bastard, didn't you say I wasn't charming? How about now? You still took the initiative to kiss me. But this feeling is pretty good. Perhaps it was because of the experience on the stage where her mother performed. Dunia's mentality was completely different, and she was a lot calmer when facing Ryuto's kiss. Then she closed her eyes, pursed her lips, and focused her attention on where their bodies touched. For Dunia, this was the first time she had experienced such a wonderful feeling. She immediately felt her body heat up, and her mind buzzed. It was as if her body was gradually floating up into the clouds, weightless and weightless. After training with Yunyen and color glaze for so long, Ryuto's experience in kissing was quite rich, and it was easy for him to get Dunia, who was a newbie, into the zone. As the two kissed, the girl couldn't help but start to respond, and her soft and delicate body also began to twist restlessly in his arms. After kissing for a while, Ryuto noticed that his hands had unknowingly become a little restless, so he quickly pushed Dunia's body away, and then said apologetically, "I'm sorry. It seems a little too much." For Dunia, who was not very proficient in kissing might be the limit of her endurance, and it might be a little too early for other things. However, what Ryuto didn't expect was that after being pushed away, Dunia leaned over again and chuckled in his ear, "Why do you think it's too much? Aren't we engaged? You should continue to treat me with hospitality, my dear." If Ryuto remembered correctly, these were the words he said on the bed in the luxurious suite of the Four Seasons Hotel in Moscow, not long ago. At that time, Dunia was trembling when she heard these words. She was scared like a little mouse caught by a cat. But now she took the initiative to say these words in Ryuto's ear, and she even looked forward to it. Ryuto naturally knew the deeper meaning contained in these words. This. Could it be? Could it be? When he thought of the meaning of hospitality, Ryuto couldn't help but feel a little thirsty, but he still said with a wry smile, "Why, don't tell me you want more?" "Can't I?" The feeling just now was really good, so it's normal for me to want to experience more. Experience more. You can't just say that. I'm not saying that. The next thing. How about we go back to the room, or do you prefer here? I'm fine with anything. Perhaps because this was her hometown, the land of Moscow where the people were tough, Dunya couldn't help but become bold tonight, and she drove the car on the highway. F***CK. Although Ryuto was not a hungry ghost, in this kind of environment, he couldn't help but feel a strong emotion in his heart. So he immediately put his arm around Dunya's legs, which were wrapped in white silk stockings, and carried the girl in his arms, running out of the Moscow Lavsky Music Theater as fast as he could. Speaking of which, this music theater was actually not far from the hotel where they lived. Ryuto carried Dunya and rushed to the third-floor rooftop like lightning, and then directly jumped down from the third floor without looking. He stepped on the billboard on the street and landed lightly. Under his rapid run, it didn't take long for the two to return to the door of the luxurious suite where they lived. After sending away the several guards here, Ryuto, before entering the door, gasped and asked the girl in her ear, "If you go in now, there's no turning back. Are you sure you want to do this?" Puff. Don't be like an old woman. Are you a man? Suddenly, Dunya, who was leaning on Ryuto, didn't know whether to laugh or cry, as if she was amused by his nagging. Am I a man? Hearing this, Ryuto couldn't stand it anymore. After all, this was a matter of dignity, and there was no room for doubt. So he said fiercely in Dunya's ear, "Whether I am a man or not, you will know in a while." Oh, I'm so scared, hee. Hey. There is really someone who is not afraid of death. After hearing the bell-like laughter, Ryuto immediately opened the door with a keycard, and rushed inside with the girl in his arms. Dong. As the door was quickly closed from the inside, the thick and heavy door seemed to separate the inside and outside of the room into two worlds. The outside world continued with the noise and chaos of the Moscow night. In the cold winter air, the smell of vodka mixed with ice and snow drifted as usual. And in the small world in the room, it exuded the gorgeous feeling of spring and the hot atmosphere of summer. 3,000 words are omitted. Early the next morning, a crimson light began to penetrate the clouds. Light appeared on the edge of the clouds, and the cold morning breeze of Moscow blew through the streets, representing the arrival of a new day. For Longdo, this morning was different from all the other mornings in the past. This was because when he opened his eyes, what he saw was not the familiar ceiling, but beautiful silvery hair. Yes, is it Dunya? Ryuto looked down and saw the girl in his arms was still sleeping. Her small head was resting on Ryuto's shoulder, and her rose-like lips seemed to be a bit swollen. Red marks could be seen on her swan-like slender neck, and her messy silver hair was scattered on the delicate velvet quilt. She looked really miserable. But in the end, this hospitality was requested by Dunya, and she also enjoyed it, so there was nothing to be pitiful about. Speaking of which, she was really strong last night. She actually, admirable. Thinking about the specific scene of the battle, Ryuto couldn't help but nod. But at this time, Dunya next to him also closed her eyes cutely, and then slowly woke up. You woke up. After discovering that his adorable little princess had woken up, Longdo smiled and lowered his head to give her a light kiss on her forehead. This action was very doting. I don't know why, but when I see your face early in the morning, I feel like punching someone. After waking up, the first thing Dunya did was to reach out and pinch Ryuto's face. Then, she crawled out of the quilt and faced the morning sun to stretch. While Ryuto teased, "Why do you feel like punching someone? Didn't you like me last night?" Bah, shameless. Go to the side and stay there. Dong Nia couldn't help but make a face at Longdo, who was still pretending to be obedient after taking advantage of her. Then, she quickly washed up and changed her clothes. She sat in front of the dressing table and combed her messy silver hair. This hair is really messy. Because she didn't take care of it before going to bed last night, Dunia's hair was already tangled into a mess, making it difficult for her to comb it. But just when she was feeling annoyed, a pair of big hands deftly took the comb from behind and gently combed the girl's hair. You really know how to express yourself at the right time. When she sat in front of the mirror and looked at Ryuto combing her hair with the silver comb, Dunia suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. There's nothing to express, I'm just combing my fiancé's hair. Isn't this a very normal thing? Long Do couldn't help but slowly stroke her hair as he felt the soft and cold sensation of a silver waterfall on his hand. Tisk, sly guy. What did you say? I said, you always like to make people's heart beat faster, you're too sly. Just when Dunia was enjoying her lover's morning makeup, she suddenly saw her flat stomach in the mirror, and her face suddenly turned red. Wait, I suddenly thought of a question. What question? Yesterday we did that, will I get pregnant? Of course it's possible, but it's okay, I'll take responsibility. After hearing Dunia's words, Ryuto smiled and patted her little head. Chapter 285. Because both of them were in a hurry last night, and because they didn't have any experience, they didn't even think about taking precautions. They stepped on the gas pedal as soon as they got on the highway. They only remembered the fear when they woke up the next morning. However, compared to the blushing Dunia, Ryuto was obviously much calmer when talking about this issue. After all, the two were engaged. Whether Dunia was pregnant or not, Ryuto would marry her in a year or two, so it wasn't a big problem whether her belly was bloated or not. Of course, if Dunia came back with a bloated belly after going to Moscow with Ryuto, he would probably be scolded, beaten, by Colored Glaze and Yunyen. But that was Ryuto's own business, it had nothing to do with Dunia. After expressing his promise again, Long Do picked up a beautiful ribbon and tied Dunia's hair into a ponytail, which was a ponytail that a young girl usually did not tie. What's this hairstyle? Why did you make it look like this? Dunia looked at herself in the mirror. It was obviously different from her usual twin ponytails. It looked more intellectual and more mature. Dunia asked curiously. This is the standard wife hairstyle. You have now added the wife attribute, so you can wear this hairstyle. Is this guy crazy? What the hell is the wife attribute? After a sigh, Dunia slowly stood up from the dressing chair, then turned her head and said with a smile, What do you think? Do I look good? After dressing up neatly and changing into a married woman style, Dunia really looked like a woman full of charm, as if she had matured a lot all of a sudden. However, this was just a matter of dressing and temperament. Her face was still that of a lowly, and her body was still that of a lowly. Therefore, this strong sense of wife x lowly wrapped around her body was really a feeling that made people want to explode. Yes, my fiancée is the prettiest. Looking at Dunia, who suddenly had the temperament of a wife, Ryuto couldn't help but hug her in his arms again. The two who just tasted the forbidden fruit were in the sweetest moment, so they stayed in the room for a while before going out to eat. There was the best restaurant in the Moscow Four Seasons Hotel. Even if it was just a buffet breakfast, every meal was delicious and couldn't be picky. By the way, you are going to meet the new owner of Tomahawk. Yeah, what is it? During the meal, Dunia stuffed a delicious fruit pancake with cream in her mouth and asked Ryuto, who was sitting across from her. After leaving the stage, Dunia returned to her previous carefree attitude, but if one looked carefully, it wouldn't be difficult to notice that the girl's eyes and posture had a strong sense of confidence. She was confident. For the current Dunia, she was full of confidence, and she was in a completely new state. Not only was she mature because she stepped onto a new level, but she also felt a sense of accomplishment because she won against two of her main competitors. First place. After last night, Dunia took the gold medal of the Ryuto tournament and became Ryuto's first woman. Or she thought she was the first woman. Kanzaki Colored Glaze, Suki Yunyen, from now on, you can only use things that I have used before. I really want to see what kind of reaction you will have after you find out. In this state, Dunia felt like she was awesome. Her attitude was so confident that it was surprising. It was as if she was a high and mighty queen of Versailles sitting on the throne. Yakov, we'll have to discuss with him later. Long Do nodded when he heard that. Although he had a good night last night, Ryuto didn't forget what he came to Moscow for. In a few hours, he had to go to the Tomahawk headquarters to talk with the new leader, Yakov, about the organization's exorbitant demand for the Big Dipper Alliance. Looking at Dunya, who was stuffing her 5th plate of pancakes into her mouth, Ryuto smiled. What, do you want to come? Nonsense. Let me be your bodyguard. I guarantee that no one will be able to hurt you. Hearing this, Dunya showed a joyful smile. Then she tightened her grip on the fork, and the thick steel fork was twisted into an indescribable strange shape. The hard steel was like plasticine in Dunya's hands. After all, this young lady had level 5 constitution, and was one of the top monsters in the world. Her strength was even comparable to Ryuto when he was in the Tao realm. Because he knew how terrifying Dunya's strength was, Ryuto didn't stop her from going with him. However, before going to the Tomahawk headquarters, he had to give Dunya some equipment. Although Dunya's physical strength was almost at the limit of a human, she could still be injured by some firearms, such as submachine guns or bombs. Therefore, after the two finished their meal and returned to the room, Ryuto began to act like Doryman. He took out a bunch of special equipment and handed it to Dunya to change into. The first thing Ryuto took out was a seemingly light rubber jumpsuit. However, when she held it in her hand, she could feel its weight. The jumpsuit looked a bit like a special jumpsuit, but instead of rubber, it was made with some kind of opaque gel. It looked a bit strange. The moment she saw the jumpsuit, Dunya was stunned. After a while, she asked strangely, You want me to wear this? Is this some kind of special interest? What are you thinking? After reaching out and patting Dunya's head, Ryuto smiled and hung the strange jumpsuit on the bedspread. Then he reached out with his right hand and a special Bauer heavy assault rifle appeared in his hand. This assault rifle was a big gift from Kaiyong to Ryuto. It was one of the most powerful assault rifles in the world. It used a large caliber 9mm armor-piercing tungsten core bullet, which could directly blast through walls. Its power was not on the same level as a normal rifle. Look carefully. In front of Dunya, Ryuto directly shot at the strange gel jumpsuit hanging on the bedspread. Bang! After the shot, the jumpsuit along with the bedspread was blown away by the huge impact. However, when Ryuto went over to pick it up, he found that the jumpsuit was almost undamaged. Only there was a small white dot on it. It was directly hit by a large caliber armor-piercing bullet, but it did not penetrate. This level of protection was completely unlike the bulletproof vests of this era. Of course, in reality, this thing was not a technology that should exist in this era. It was a special equipment that Ryuto bought from the market, Rogue Gel Bulletproof Vest. The price of this bulletproof vest was as high as 100 million yuan. It was one of the more expensive items among the Rogue equipment. However, there was an advantage to being expensive, which was that this thing was very useful. According to the product description, this liquid bulletproof vest was made of sheer thickening gel. It contained special particles that could freely float. When the gel was disturbed by bullets, these special particles would collide and form a strong resistance against the disturbance. According to Ryuto's test, this gel bulletproof vest's resistance to bullets was about 5 times stronger than steel. Although it weighed 20 to 30 pounds, it would not hinder movement. It was just right for people like Dunya to wear. With Dunya's LV5 physical ability, a few dozen pounds of weight was nothing. However, after wearing this thing, she could almost ignore most firearms attacks. Unless someone directly shot at her unprotected face, they could not hurt her at all. However, with Dunya's current strength, it was easier said than done if someone wanted to hit her face with a gun. This young lady was not a target. Oh. So that's how it is, this is good. After listening to Ryuto's explanation, Dunya excitedly put on the liquid bulletproof vest. Watching a beauty undress and put on her clothes was originally a pleasure. Ryuto smiled as he watched Dunya put on the bulletproof vest. Then, he continued to take out a few other special items. This time, Ryuto gave Dunya a total of 3 items. In addition to the liquid bulletproof vest, there was a pair of special Rogue pressurized gloves and Rogue turbine shoes. The gloves could greatly increase the impact of an attack and protect the hand joints from damage. Ryuto tested it before. When wearing the gloves, he could knock over a car with one punch. On the other hand, the pair of turbine shoes that looked like ordinary sports shoes could greatly increase one's speed and jumping ability. When used at full strength, one could jump from the first floor to the third floor. These two items were originally for Ryuto's own use. Anyway, he didn't like to use his fists recently. Instead, he was obsessed with the pleasure of using various firearms. So, he simply gave these items to Dunya as a reward for her efforts last night. At this time, Dunya, who wore the Rogue Gel bulletproof vest, Rogue pressurized gloves, and Rogue turbine shoes, her physical ability had far exceeded the scope of human beings. She could be described as an invincible Iron Man. What about you? Don't you need to equip anything? After putting on these special items, Dunya looked at Ryuto, who had a happy expression, and asked with a somewhat curious tone. After all, they might be fighting with Tomahawk in a while. If Ryuto, the protagonist, didn't prepare enough, wouldn't it be easy for something to happen? This was not what Dunya wanted. Actually, I have a lot of equipment. It's just that you can't see it. When he heard this sentence, Ryuto smiled slightly, then smiled and opened the personal page that only he could see. After a few months, now the data on Ryuto's personal page was comparable to a god. Chapter 286. About half a year has passed since the fight with Sai-2. In the past half a year, Ryuto had earned a lot of money from the Black Hand Alliance and the Rulong Security Company. Later on, Mrs. Rue Hui had returned 2 billion to him. He was really rich. According to Long Do's incomplete statistics, the total amount of money he had earned in the past 6 months was at least 5 billion yuan. Later on, because of the large amount of money that came into his account, he could no longer keep track of it. More than 5 billion, what kind of concept was that? That was a level where one could really casually buy things in the shop and add points to one's personal attribute points. At this time, on the interface that Dunya could not see, Ryuto's attributes had changed. Name, Ryuto Kiryoage, 16 attributes, Wisdom LV4, Physique LV4, Courage LV4, Insight LV4, Charm LV4 Chi opening rate. 81% title. Stupid Rich, obtained after spending more than 5 billion, the number of title slots will increase by 2, Stupid Rich, obtained after spending more than 500 million, the number of equipment slots will increase by 2. God of Guns, obtained after shooting more than 50,000 bullets, man and gun as one, invincible. Equipment. Bauer Heavy Assault Rifle, legendary, Nano Spider. Grappling Rope, legendary, dual-wielding Glock 19C, elite. RPG-32 Rocket Launcher, elite. Super Large Grenade Box, elite. Equipment. Nun Tools. Hooligan Velcro, Hooligan Analysis Mirror, Hooligan Voice Changing Mask, Hooligan Glider, Hooligan Gel Body Armor, Hooligan X-Ray Lens, Hooligan Sonic Wave Instrument Skills, Chenkuan Foundation Technique, 80%. Princess Mystery Technique, 80%. Ancient Bajiquan, 100%. Furamaki Style Martial Arts, 80%. Bone Twisting Hand, 100%. Iron Bone Mastery, 100%. Copper Skin Mastery, 100%. Parkour Master, 100%. Hooligan Immortality, 100%. Silent Movement, 100%. Aura Shield, 100%. Omnipotent Driver, 100%. Firearms Mastery, 100%. Total Assets. 854 million renminbi. How should he describe these attributes? Just one look was enough to scare a person to death. There was no need to mention his 5 measurements. Other than Charm, which he didn't spend money to upgrade to LV5, he spent 500 million on each of the other 4 attributes to upgrade them to the highest or second highest level. With LV5 Physique and LV5 Courage added together, he was basically at the level of a monster who could walk unhindered through a mountain of blades and a sea of flames. Even if the Heavenly Emperor came, he would still be able to beat the crap out of you. With LV4 resourcefulness and LV4 insight added together, it was enough to carry out very profound thinking and even see through the mental activities of others. After that, his chi opening rate also rose to a near-perfect level by repeatedly committing suicide to buy the Qian Kuan Foundation building technique and the Empress Mystic Art. However, because the last purchase of these two techniques was too expensive, 320 million each, he didn't buy them to the maximum for the time being. Other than these two books, there was also the Furamaki-style martial arts that didn't reach the maximum. Because the price of the blank skill book was also a bit expensive, he could only buy the 80% proficiency that was completely enough. Of course, other than that, most of the useful skills had already been bought to the maximum proficiency. Combined with Ryuto's LV5 physique and 81% chi opening rate, his unarmed combat strength had already reached a level that was close to invincible. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if the current him went back to half a year ago to fight with someone who had entered the Tao, he wouldn't even need to use the hooligan does not die by bare hands to trick others. He could more or less kill them within 10 moves. The current Ryuto was this strong, at the level of a ceiling. However, compared to unarmed combat, the unlocking of the two titles Stupid Guy Has a Lot of Money and Gun God was also a big key to increasing his combat strength. The former required more than $5 billion to obtain, but it was very useful. It could actually increase the number of titles in the title bar by 2 slots, which meant that he could equip 3 titles at the same time. The latter, on the other hand, was obtained by firing 50,000 bullets. It could upgrade the gun, a weapon that Ryuto didn't use very often, to the extreme, allowing him to wield it like an extension of his arm and the state of one with the gun. The Gun God title, combined with the Gun Master, at full proficiency and super high insight, Ryuto could even accurately shoot a fly from 100 meters away. Moreover, the speed at which he drew his gun was also the fastest in the world. He really could be called the gun god of this generation. Other than that, Ryuto's item bar also added a few useful special items. The Hooligan's gel bulletproof vest, needless to say, it had the same effect as Dunya's, which could greatly increase one's defense. After wearing it, Ryuto's full proficiency of Bronze Skin Mastery, Iron Bone Mastery, and LV5 Physique, he could almost ignore the power of a rocket launcher. A full automatic rifle strafing was no different from scratching an itch. The remaining Hooligan's X-ray lens and Hooligan sonograph were also very useful items. The former could see through a certain range, such as what was in someone's cabinet, while the latter could detect the number of creatures in the surroundings through sound waves. In other words, any tricks in front of Ryuto were almost meaningless. He was like a robot with a radar on, knowing how many enemies were nearby, and also knowing what the hands under the table were doing. As for the Bauer heavy assault rifle, Spider grappling rope, dual-wielding Glock 19C, and super-large grenade box, they were all the best equipment that Kai Yong had found. These powerful weapons, together with the RPG-32 individual rocket launcher from before, formed Ryuto's current super-powerful firepower system. Coupled with the God of Guns title, he could dominate the battlefield, even more so than Rambo. Because of this, when Long Do found out that the Mafia in Moscow dared to pick a fight with the Black Hand Alliance, his first reaction was to teach them a lesson and let them know who had the final say in this world. Just like that, when the two of them were completely prepared, they were lovey-dovey in the room for a while. Only then did they hear a knock on the door. Ryuto opened the door and found that the Big Dipper Alliance member, Yi Xian, was already waiting with a few subordinates. He bowed to the two of them and said, "Boss Tong Sheng, are you ready to go now?" "Sure." "Speaking of which, where is the Tomahawk base?" "It's at 707 Old Village Street in the outskirts of Moscow. It's about half an hour's drive from here." "Okay, let's go." After hearing the address, Ryuto took out his phone from his pocket, entered the address, and sent it to someone. "That Boss Tong Sheng? Is sister-in-law coming with us?" Before leaving, Yi Xian looked at Dunya, who was in light clothes, and couldn't help but show a surprised expression. Yesterday, when Ryuto came to Moscow with a little beauty like Dunya, Yi Xian could only understand that the boss needed someone to serve him, so he didn't think it was strange. But now they were going to negotiate with the boss of Tomahawk, which could lead to a fight at any time. Wasn't it suicide to bring such a girl there? Ryuto smiled and said, "It's okay, don't worry, she's my most trusted bodyguard." Most trusted? It can't be, right? Is Boss Tong Shang joking? After taking another look at Dunya, who had delicate skin and delicate facial features like a doll, Yi Xian felt that it was inappropriate, but he couldn't say anything. He could only order his men to drive to the old village street. While driving, Yi Xian repeatedly emphasized, "Boss Tong Shang, the Tomahawk base we're going to is their nest. According to our previous investigation, there are 3 bases nearby, and there are at least 500 mafia members gathered in the bases. Almost all of them are armed with live ammunition, and there are also a lot of heavy firepower weapons. Oh, so, it's best not to have a conflict with Yakov, or else it's really difficult to protect the 2 of you with our manpower." Speaking until here, Yi Xian couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. After all, when he knew that Ryuto was going to negotiate with Yakov, he was almost scared to death by the young leader of the Black Hand Alliance. In Yi Xian's view, this was a stupid move to put his life in the hands of others. If Yakov only wanted to extort some money, it was fine, but if the 2 sides really couldn't come to an agreement and fought, and Ryuto died here, then Yi Xian didn't know how to face the boss of Mizar. But unlike Yi Xian's worried expression, Ryuto just smiled and didn't say anything, because this small problem didn't exist in his view. In the end, Ryuto didn't want to deal with a mere tomahawk, but the weapons department of the Heavenly Eye Group that might fish in troubled waters. Compared to that huge organization, Tomahawk was simply a group of small fries baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. They didn't pose any threat to Ryuto. Just like this, in Yi Xian's fearful thoughts, the car slowly drove to the outskirts of Moscow and stopped in front of a very peaceful-looking villa. This was a 3-story villa built in the forest. The villa was surrounded by thick walls that even trucks would have a hard time breaking through. It looked like a military building. Even from afar, one could see that inside and outside the villa, there were all kinds of assault rifles, shotguns, hunting rifles, and other weapons in their hands patrolling. It was a completely austere atmosphere. And before Ryuto and Dunya entered through the main door, he ordered Yi Xian, "You guys wait outside. If there are gunshots inside, don't come in, immediately retreat, understand?" "Ah. This Boss Tong Sheng? You guys plan to go in with just 2 people? At this time, Yi Xian's face became even paler, but he still tried to persuade, "Wait, Boss Tong Sheng, do you speak Russian? At least bring me along as a translator, right? Otherwise, how can you—" "It's okay." But before he finished speaking, Dunya, a native of the Northern Kingdom, said with a smile in Russian that was much more fluent than his. Chapter 287. Although Dunya didn't speak Russian much, she was still a Russian. Naturally, she wouldn't forget how to speak her mother tongue. Acting as a translator was not a problem for her. This shouldn't be a problem, right? Seeing Ryuto and Dunya walk into the villa under the escort of several brawny men, Yi Xian, who was waiting outside with his men, couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Speaking of which, the new leader of Tomahawk, Yakov, had a very bad reputation in Moscow's underworld. Moscow's underworld was originally made up of a group of villains. If even this group of villains thought Yakov was a villain, then this guy obviously had a problem. Perhaps because it was already noon, when Ryuto and Dunya arrived at the villa's 3rd-floor hall, they saw the new leader, Yakov, who was sitting alone at a large dining table, wolfing down food. Yakov looked like a typical European. His nose was narrow and raised, his lips were thin, and his facial features were defined. His beard and hair were as lush as a lion's. Right now, this Tomahawk leader was wearing a green combat uniform and heavy leather boots. He was holding a sharp military knife in his hand and cutting the raw meat on the table. That's right, raw meat. Although there was no way to distinguish what kind of meat it was indeed a large piece of raw meat on the table. And this man didn't hesitate to cut off pieces of meat, stuffed the meat mixed with blood into his mouth, and chewed hard. Although Europe also had the habit of eating undercooked meat, but there weren't many people like Yakov who directly used a military knife to cut and eat a large piece of raw meat. This gave people a feeling of drinking blood. He didn't look like a normal person. And in this spacious hall, other than Yakov himself, there were at least 7 to 8 brawny men sitting and standing on the sofa, chairs, and by the stove. These guys were either wiping the sharp blades in their hands, maintaining various types of firearms, or lifting huge dumbbells for exercise. After seeing Ryuto and Dunya come in, these brawny men looked at them with malicious eyes, except for the cloaked man standing behind Yakov. Although it was indoors, the man was still wearing a heavy cloak. Furthermore, he was wearing an eye patch like a pirate's on his left eye. Coupled with his sinister and cold gaze, one could tell that this guy was not a simple character with a single glance. But after seeing Yakov's table manners, Ryuto maintained a polite smile and said to Dunya without turning his head, "Yo, this guy is trying to intimidate us, but he looks funny." Humph. Dunya, after hearing this, she walked 2 steps forward and said to the man sitting behind the table in Russian, "Yakov, this is the leader of the Black Hand Alliance, Ryuto Kiryo. You should know he's coming, right?" After hearing Dunya's words, Yakov slowly put down the military knife in his hand and revealed a wild and bloody wolf-like smile. "Indeed," he sneered, "but I didn't expect the legendary leader of the Black Hand Alliance to be a brat. What a disappointment." Dunya also replied tit for tat. "I also didn't expect the new leader of Tomahawk to be such a rude bastard. Have you thrown away the etiquette of northern hospitality into the trash can?" Whoosh. When Dunya mercilessly mocked Yakov, the surrounding members of Tomahawk immediately stood up and looked at the girl with murderous eyes. But Yakov himself didn't have any reaction. He even laughed. "Ha ha ha. As expected of Saito Takahiro's daughter, you have the same spirit as your father, although his Russian isn't as good as yours." "Oh." Hearing her father's name, Dunya raised her eyebrows and said, "You've seen my father? That was more than a decade ago. At that time, I had some conflicts with your father, so I wanted to kill him. In the end, he defeated my strongest fighter." Suddenly, Yakov smiled and said to the cloaked man behind him, "Let this little princess see what her father did back then." The cloaked man nodded and walked to the table. He opened his cloak in front of Dunya and Ryuto. The cloak slid off, exposing a crippled right hand that was embedded with a sharp blade at the elbow. The right hand had been cut off from the elbow, and a knife had been inserted into the top of the head. It looked very eerie and terrifying. Obviously, this was a memorial left by Saito Takahiro, the strongest fighter of Tomahawk, when he was in Moscow more than a decade ago. "Your father is really powerful." Seeing that Dunya was completely indifferent, Yakov continued with a smile. "At that time, I ordered him to take your father's life. As a result, his right hand was broken by a punch, and his left eye was shattered by a palm strike. He went from a normal person to a half-cripple." Humph. But after hearing Yakov's words, Dunya sneered and said, "That's a pity. After all, my father is too benevolent. If it were me, I wouldn't be able to deal with it so easily." "Oh, what would happen if it were you? I'm curious." Hearing this, Yakov's eyes sharpened and nodded to the cloaked man. Next, the cloaked man moved. The cloak in his left hand flew to Dunya, blocking the girl's view, and at the same time, his figure rushed forward like lightning. The sharp blade in his right hand was aimed at the left carotid artery of the girl's neck. When an expert makes a move, it's easy to tell. Although the cloaked man was almost crippled by Takahiro more than a decade ago, after a certain body transformation, his strength was better than before. Especially the sword in place of his arm, it was even more powerful. Such a sinister move to flick the cloak and stab the neck, coupled with the special design of the knife with 2 blood grooves, if one were to be scraped near the carotid artery, there would only be one outcome. A large amount of blood would gush out, and one would instantly become a bloody person and die. But at the moment when the cloaked man moved, Ryuto, who was not far away, did not move, and even had a relaxed expression on his face, as if he didn't care whether Dunya would be hurt or not. Indeed, in fact, he didn't need to care. Because in the next second, when the sharp blade quickly pierced the cloak, a slender fist wearing a glove had landed on the man's face. Too fast. Dunia's speed was simply too fast. Although the man's speed was extremely fast, but compared to Dunia's super speed, it paled in comparison. Before the cloak could cover the girl, she had already leapt up, and in mid-air, a fist punched the cloaked man's left cheek. Generally speaking, what would happen after being hit by someone's fist? Swelling? Bleeding? Fracture? Fainting? None of those. After being struck by Dunia's fist, the result would be 10 times more horrifying than what one would expect. Because under Yakov's suddenly horrified gaze, the cloaked man's neck flew out like a baseball, and coincidentally landed on the dining table in front of him. What is this? Originally, the dining table was already badly mutilated due to some unknown animal's meat. Now, a complete face, with an excited expression, suddenly landed on top of it, and the face was facing Yakov. This scene was extremely bizarre. With a punch, the man's head was sent flying, but his face was not injured. Very obviously, Dunia's punch not only contained extreme strength, but also contained an extremely exquisite technique. If not, the cloaked man's head wouldn't have been sent flying, but rather his head would have exploded like a watermelon. But this was obviously the result Dunia wanted. When the cloaked man's head landed in front of Yakov, the expression on the face of the new head of Tomahawk couldn't be more marvelous. At the same time, the surrounding 7 murderous-looking men who seemed ready to attack at any time were stunned in place. Obviously, Dunia's terrifying punch had made their scalps numb. "I told you." After casually making such a terrifying move, Dunia sneered. "My father's weakness is that he is too benevolent, otherwise he wouldn't have let such trash live until today. But it doesn't matter, the work that my father didn't finish, as his daughter, I will finish it." Looking at the bloody head on the dining table, Dunia's eyes flashed with a trace of disdain. Yakov finally realized what had happened. He finally stood up with a furious face and slammed the table. He loudly shouted to the surrounding men, "Attack! Kill them!" In order to deal with the visit of the Black Hand Alliance leader, Yakov had already made ample preparations. Almost a second after he gave the order, 7 long and short, fully automatic and semi-automatic firearms were all aimed at Ryuto and Dunia. They didn't hesitate to pull the trigger. For this group of mafia members who usually used guns to make a living, drawing a gun, aiming, and designing this series of actions were already familiar to them. The speed was so fast that it could be completed in about a second. But for Ryuto, who was present, this 1 second was really too long. Bang! 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 7 waves of sharp gunshots flashed almost at the same time, and an incredible scene appeared. What happened? Under Yakov's stunned gaze, the 7 men who were ready to shoot all clenched their fingers in pain and fell to the ground. Upon closer inspection, the index fingers that they used to pull the trigger were all broken in an instant. The cause of all this was a pair of Glock 19C dual pistols that Long Do held in his hands at some point in time. Chapter 288. There was still some smoke coming out of the thin handgun's muzzle. Obviously, it was from here that the 7 bullets that were like divine punishment had been shot out. The Glock 19C, in Ryuto's hand, was a pocket-sized automatic pistol. It was extremely small and easy to carry and dual-wield. It also had a magazine capacity of 15 bullets. It was a small firearm very suitable for this god of guns. Although the firing speed of this automatic pistol was completely dependent on the speed of pulling the trigger, it was the first time Yakov saw 7 consecutive shots that were so fast and so accurate. The moment the 7 gunmen pulled out their guns and pulled the triggers, Long Do raised his hands several times faster. The 2 Glock 19Cs spat out sparks like lightning and accurately hit the fingers of the 7 gunmen that were pulling the triggers. What is this? Is this the descent of God? When Yakov saw this scene, he was completely dumbfounded. He couldn't imagine that there would be such a fast and accurate gun in the world. "Hey, is that it? Show me what else you have." Just when Yakov was about to be scared out of his wits, Dunya slowly came to the front of the table and said to the new head of Tomahawk in a condescending tone over the head that was sent flying by her punch. Monster. These two guys are both monsters. Yakov had been mocking the leader of the Black Hand Alliance, Ryuto Kiryu, as an idiot who dared to bring a little girl to the Tomahawk headquarters alone. It wasn't until they showed their prowess that Yakov realized that these two monsters weren't idiots, but they didn't even put Tomahawk in their eyes. The female monster who could send heads flying with one punch, Saitu Dunya. The male monster who could defeat 7 gunmen in an instant, Ryuto Kiryu. At this moment, Yakov looked at them with deep fear in his eyes because he didn't know what kind of creature he was fighting. But even so, the new head of Tomahawk still forced himself to say, "Don't think that you've won just like that. There are still 3 bases around this villa. Hundreds of my subordinates are stationed there. They even have heavy firepower in their hands. If you kill me, you won't be able to escape either." The so-called heavy firepower weapons included but were not limited to rocket launchers, mortars, various missiles, and so on. According to Yakov, as long as Long Do and Dunya killed him, the subordinates over there would immediately launch missiles and destroy the entire villa. At that time, no matter how powerful you two are, you won't be able to avoid the bombardment of the rocket launchers and mortars. So it's better for us to sit down and talk. Seeing that the hard way didn't work, Yakov changed his strategy. He put on a "you're just here to talk business, there's no need for violence" attitude, completely ignoring the fact that he was the one who made the first move. After listening to Dunya's translation, Ryuto's face showed a joyful expression. He took out his phone from his pocket and looked at the message he just sent. Then he said to Dunya, "Let this guy call the people in the 3 bases around here." "Call everyone here?" This, although Dunya didn't quite understand Ryuto's meaning, she still faithfully translated his words to Yakov. "You don't believe me, right?" Suddenly, Yakov picked up the phone under the table and laughed. "In a moment, you'll be pointed at by a lot of heavy weapons, so it's better not to be so arrogant." After saying this, he dialed the number of the first base. Beep beep. Beep beep. Beep beep. But strangely, Yakov waited for more than 10 seconds, but no one at the base picked up the phone to answer. "What's going on? Don't tell me they're sleeping in?" After frowning, Yakov continued to call the second base. Beep beep. Beep beep. Beep beep. But very strangely, no one picked up the phone at the second base. At this time, Yakov finally felt a little panicked. He hurriedly dialed the number of the last base, but it was obviously the same result. What's going on? Why are the people in the surrounding bases? Don't tell me. Hey, look at this. Just when Yakov thought of the worst result, Ryuto also took his phone and put it in front of him. Yakov looked up and saw a very familiar scene on the phone. If he wasn't scared out of his wits, it should be the scene inside one of the bases nearby. Although it was the scene inside the base, the situation was completely different from usual. In the huge base, there was smoke and blood everywhere. The members of Tomahawk were like garbage being thrown into a truck by a group of fully armed professional special forces wearing camouflage vests with a pattern of golden dragon swirling sky and multifunctional tactical helmets. They were ready to be buried somewhere. When Yakov saw this scene, he only felt his knees soften, and he knelt on the ground unconsciously. It's over. Everything is over. Obviously, the subordinates in the 3 bases not far away have been wiped out, and his last bargaining chip as the new leader of Tomahawk has completely disappeared. This time, he was really meat on the chopping block. At this time, Dunya, who saw the pictures in the phone, couldn't help but ask, "Oh, where did those soldiers come from? They're so fast." This is the most elite, Dragon Fong tactical team of our Rulong Security Company. Every one of them is an elite. It's easy to suppress the mafia. In fact, as early as yesterday, Ryuto had already ordered Gao Yuan to transfer the Dragon Fong tactical team to Moscow. Not long ago, he also sent the address of the Tomahawk headquarters to the team captain there and ordered them to suppress all the enemies in the 3 bases nearby. With the strength of the elite mercenaries who had been fighting on the battlefield in the Middle East not long ago, it was easy for them to do this, especially when the enemy was caught off guard. This made the battle quickly become a one-sided massacre. After turning off the phone, Ryuto grabbed Yakov's hair and pulled him up from the ground. He said to him with a smile, "Now you should know what the situation is, right? Who is in charge here?" When he heard Dunia's translation, Yakov replied with a pale face. "The previous transaction plan of tripling the price is cancelled. In the future, Tomahawk guarantees to supply you firearms at the original price. Is that okay?" Bang! The next second after Dunia translated his words to Ryuto, the pistol in Ryuto's hand spewed out a burst of fire, killing a member of Tomahawk, who fell to the ground and covered his finger not far away. Huh. Seeing this guy pull out a gun and kill without saying anything, Yakov quickly continued, No. I mean, in order to show my sincerity, we will supply you at 70% of the previous price." Bang! Before he finished, Ryuto fired 2 more shots and directly blew up the heads of 2 Tomahawk members who were about to escape. 130%. That's almost our cost price. Let's make friends. I don't want to earn a penny from you. Bang! Bang! Another 4 shots were fired at the same time as lightning. The last 4 Tomahawk members who were still alive in the hall were all killed. When Ryuto finally pressed the muzzle on Yakov's head, the man almost collapsed in fear. No money. As long as you let me go. I will do anything. I will supply you with weapons for free in the future. In a situation where there was no other way, Yakov could only make the most humble promise while trembling with fear. However, this was not what Ryuto wanted. He pointed the gun at Yakov's head and asked, "Recently, someone in the Moscow underground world purchased nuclear materials from your group of mafias. Does that have anything to do with your sudden increase in price?" After listening to Dunia's translation, Yakov's face suddenly changed. Obviously, Ryuto was right. So Yakov quickly replied, "Yes, there is such a thing. Our Tomahawk happened to have a batch of nuclear materials in storage and couldn't sell them. That person said that we could buy them all at once, but the condition was that we were not allowed to sell weapons to your Black Hand Alliance. So we raised the price to a level that you couldn't accept. We were forced. As expected, it was Nicholas who did it." After understanding the whole story, Ryuto couldn't help but sneer. The old grudges between Ryuto and the Heavenly Eye Group were long known to both sides. Presumably, the Heavenly Eye Group recently noticed the rapid expansion of the Black Hand Alliance, so they wanted to do something to them. Coincidentally, the group needed to make a big deal with the Moscow mafias to purchase all the nuclear materials in their hands. Therefore, Nicholas thought of cutting off the Black Hand Alliance's purchase of weapons in Moscow to limit the development of this emerging force. This kind of roundabout approach was very similar to the style of the weapons department head, because in Red Album 2, No Survivors, the guy who used to be a bare KGB agent was indeed very sinister and often used some underhanded methods, such as ambushing all kinds of special bombs that he developed and so on. Thinking of this, Ryuto continued to ask, "Who was the person who contacted you before? Is it Nicholas? Where are they?" "It's Nicholas, he..." Beep. Just as Yakov was about to say some information about the minister of the Heavenly Eye Group, all of a sudden, the sound of some mechanism being activated came from the floor under his seat. Boom! In the next moment, the bomb that had been hidden under the floor exploded with a loud bang. The moment the bomb exploded, the strong blast and impact centered on the seat Yakov was used to sitting as the center, and almost the entire hall was swept in. Chapter 289. The bomb buried in the ground suddenly exploded. Yakov, who was sitting directly above the bomb, almost didn't have time to react before he was blown into a bloody mess. The huge and exquisite dining table flew to the ceiling and then slammed into it. When the dining table worth hundreds of thousands of rubles fell to the ground with a lot of dust and ceiling debris, even the designer couldn't recognize it. At the same time, when the explosion slowly dissipated, the originally magnificent villa's third-floor hall also showed a messy scene. The shattered floor, ceiling, chairs, and ornaments mixed with human wreckage scattered around. The scene was simply like hell. And in the center of hell, Ryuto protected Dunya in his arms, using his back to withstand the power of the explosion at close range. Generally speaking, Ryuto withstood the impact of the explosion at a distance of at most 1 meter from the explosion site. The result was most likely to be blown apart. But in fact, this was not the case. At the moment of the explosion, he quickly turned around and lowered his head to hug Dunya, using his back to withstand the explosion, but the result was only his clothes were blown apart. The rogue gel bulletproof vest inside was still intact, and he was completely fine. It was simply the strength of a rogue's body. After coming out from Ryuto's arms, Dunya looked at the position where Yakov was originally, and asked in confusion, What happened? Why did it suddenly explode? It was a listening bomb, we were tricked, that bastard Nikolai. Suddenly, Ryuto stood up and patted the dust on his body, and said with a dignified face. Obviously, even if Yakov had cerebral palsy, it was impossible for him to bury a bomb under his butt, so the bomb was definitely not buried by him. And very coincidentally, the bomb buried under the floor happened to explode when Yakov was about to say the information about the buyer. There was only one reason for the situation, and that was that this hall was monitored by someone. And when they heard that the guy was about to reveal some important information, they activated the bomb and killed him. Perhaps they wanted to kill Ryuto as well. There weren't many people who could plant a bomb in Tomahawk's nest right in front of him. Coincidentally, there was one in Moscow, and that was the head of the weapons department of the Heavenly Eye Group, Nikolai. According to Ryuto's knowledge, Nikolai was a true master of arms. As a member of the KGB, he was highly proficient in all kinds of light and heavy firepower weapons. He was especially fond of all kinds of bombs, so he was jokingly called the explosive genius by the players in the game. Nicholas had been to Tomahawk's base before, and he had enough strength and reason to bury the bomb, so there was no need to suspect anyone else. But now, Ryuto had planned to find some information about Nikolai from Yakov's mouth and infer where the nuclear materials had gone. It would be best if he could stop them from leaving Moscow. But now that the bomb went off, the new head of Tomahawk was turned into a pile of debris. There was no way he could get anything out of him. Sigh. I can only ask the other mafias? So troublesome. Thinking of this, Ryuto couldn't help but sigh. Then he planned to go outside and follow Yi Xian to find the other mafias in Moscow that sold nuclear materials. But at this moment, Dunya cautiously said, Do you want to change your clothes before going out? Change my clothes? It's a bit dirty, but it doesn't matter. It's not a matter of whether it's dirty or not, it's... But? After hearing Dunya's words, Long Do turned his head to look at his perky and powerful buttocks, only to discover that his pitch-black buttocks were wantonly blooming in the cold wind. With Ryuto's strength, he could indeed do it without looking back at the explosion. But the problem was that he could do it, but his clothes couldn't. Therefore, after blocking the explosion with his back, the clothes on his back, from the collar to his thighs, were all gone. The tight-fitting Rogue's gel bulletproof vest had also turned black, but one could still vaguely see his swaying buttocks. Nikolai, I'm not done with you. After quickly running to the second floor and changing into a set of clothes, Ryuto looked at Dunya, who was staring at his buttocks with a smile, and his resentment toward the Minister of Arms became even stronger. But no matter how much resentment he still had to do what he had to do. Soon after, Ryuto, led by Yi Xian, who was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out of his head, went to find the other mafias in Moscow one by one. Unfortunately, it was too late. When Ryuto found them and used some similar methods to have a friendly negotiation with them to make them willing to tell the truth, he found out that Nikolai had already left with his men. In addition, in the other mafia bases, they also found listening bombs similar to the one in Tomahawk's base. When the mafias found out that a bomb was installed in their base, they were furious, but they couldn't do anything to the bastard Nikolai. They could only sign a new contract with Ryuto, promising to continue to supply large amounts of firearms to the Black Hand Alliance at a very low price. This new contract, in addition to the large amount of light and heavy firepower weapons that the Dragon Fong team dug out from the Tomahawk warehouse, was more than enough for Ryuto to arm the Rulong Security Company to the teeth. It could be said that this trip to Moscow was a profitable one. However, although he made a lot of money, when he left Moscow on the third morning, Ryuto's expression was still very unhappy. After all, the most important nuclear materials were transported back to Yoto by Nikolai. The Tenmu group was still building the ultimate nuclear weapon, Sixth Demon's Fury, that could sink Sakura according to the plan. Ryuto didn't accomplish anything. Ryuto, get ready to go online.
Okay.
Seeing Ryuto's sullen and absent-minded look, Dunya came over and hugged his arm considerately. She smiled and said in his ear, "Don't be unhappy. How about I stay with you for a few days and accompany you?" "Accompany me?" "Oh, this is a good idea." After hearing Dunya's meaningful words, Ryuto's mood suddenly became better. After all, the thought of being able to bring this Lolita wife home and having a good time with her at night naturally made him feel happy, spirited, and passionate. Because he had been sleeping in the Moscow Four Seasons Hotel for the past few days, although he slept soundly with the loli every day, Ryuto still missed his own bed a little. And he also wanted to try the feeling of having sex in his own bed. "By the way, my bedroom hasn't been blessed yet. Let Dunya try the bed first to see if she is used to it. Otherwise, Colored Glaze and Yunyen won't be used to it in the future, hee." Thinking of this, Ryuto couldn't help but reach out and hug the slender waist of the lowly wife next to him. He looked like he might be arrested at any time. However, just as Ryuto proudly hugged Dunya and prepared to get on the plane first and fly back to Tokyo, a little girl ran over and handed a letter to Ryuto. Looking at the letter handed over by the little girl, Dunya asked in confusion, "Brat? What is this?" "I don't know, an uncle over there asked me to help deliver it." The little girl shook her head, then she put the letter in Ryuto's hand and ran away. "An uncle?" Dunya quickly looked around when she heard the words, but the airport waiting area was full of people. It was a bit difficult to find a specific uncle. "No need to look, I know who it is. It's the guy Nicola who sent the letter." Although the envelope hadn't been opened yet, Ryuto had already seen the contents of the letter with his rogue's perspective, as well as the big Heavenly Eye Group logo. Thus, Long Do casually opened the envelope. The content of the letter was just a simple line of words. "Thank you for your hard work. See you in Tokyo." It's really a letter in Nicola's style. After looking at the handwritten letter from the head of the Heavenly Eye Group Weapons Department, Nicola, Ryuto couldn't help but show a forthright smile. Indeed, although the dragon battle had profited this time, the Heavenly Eye Group had clearly profited even more. They had successfully obtained the nuclear materials they wanted and could go back to show off their skills and create their ultimate killing weapon. But even so, Ryuto didn't lose. He still had a lot of opportunities to stop these guys from making trouble. After all, according to his foresight, it would take at least a year for the Sixth Sky Demon's Fury to be made. In other words, there was still a year left before the decisive battle with Iam. During this period of time, Ryuto could still continue to develop his strength and strengthen his strength. At least after a year, he had full confidence in taking down the Heavenly Eye Group and that perverted woman. However, just as Ryuto was hugging Dunya and boarding the plane, in the crowd not far away, a burly man wearing a windbreaker and a buzz cut was silently watching the man's figure. Ryuto Kiryu is a man with a lot of tolerance. It seems that he will become a big threat to us in the future. It's better to get rid of him as soon as possible. Watching the plane that Ryuto was on slowly soar into the sky, the windbreaker man, Nicola, took out a red button from his pocket. Without hesitation, he pressed it down. However, after pressing the button, nothing happened. The windbreaker man frowned and pressed the button a few more times, but there was still no reaction at all. The plane in the sky was about to fly out of his sight. In fact, before this, Nicola had already arranged for someone to install a bomb on the plane that Ryuto was going to take. He was ready to kill the guy and the plane together. The reason why he sent the letter was just to make Ryuto careless and think that they would return to Yoto before making a move. Who knew? It was meaningless. The bomb that Nicola arranged in advance couldn't be detonated at all. You actually noticed my plan in advance and defused the bomb. Amazing, it seems that I underestimated you. Seeing Ryuto's plane slowly flying in the direction of Yoto, Nicola couldn't help but sigh and disappear into the noisy crowd. Chapter 290. Ryuto knew that Nicholas would put a bomb on his plane because that guy liked to play this kind of dirty trick. So after he defused the bomb in advance, the plane successfully flew back to Yoto and landed on the runway of Yoto Haneda Airport. Because this trip was quite tiring for Ryuto and Dunya, the two returned to the Rulon Group headquarters and directly fell asleep in Ryuto's room. They didn't do anything messy at night. Just when they got up in the morning of the next day, Dunya, who was wearing a nightgown, patted Ryuto's quilt and shouted to him, "Get up, we have to go to school." "Go to school?" Ryuto heard the words and got out of the quilt in a daze. He lay on Dunya's smooth thighs and looked at her beautiful face from the bottom and smiled. "Why, when did you become a good student? Do you like to go to school so much?" In fact, from Ryuto's current situation, it was meaningless for him to go to school. Usually, he just regarded the school as a game place to communicate with the three women. So if Dunya didn't say that she wanted to go to school early in the morning, Ryuto planned to stay with her in the quilt for a while and do something fun to move his body. But for some reason, Dunya seemed to insist on dragging Ryuto to school, so the two got out of the quilt and washed their clothes. After tidying up and eating breakfast, they got in the car and drove to school. He. Early in the morning, Dunya seemed to be in a good mood. Even when she was sitting in the car and rushing to school, this lowly wife kept making strange laughter. No one knew what she was laughing about. However, when the two of them arrived at the parking lot outside the school, got out of the car, and walked toward the school gate, Long Do finally realized what the kid was up to. "Yo hey." Accompanied by a soft chuckle, the young girl reached out and hugged Ryuto's shoulder, walking on the road with a sweet posture of a young girl in love. With such an intimate hug and the sweet smile on Dunya's face, anyone who wasn't blind would be able to tell that the two of them were lovers. Coincidentally, this was the entrance of Dooley First High School, and it was the peak period of school, so the surrounding streets were packed with people. Therefore, this scene caused many people's jaws to drop. Am I seeing things? Is that Ryuto Kiryu and Saito Dunya? Seeing the two of them walking together intimately, with the woman still holding the man's arm, most of the students who were preparing to go to school were stunned. That's right. Early in the morning, the first grade's campus belle, Dong Nia, hugged Long Do's arm and walked towards the school. At a glance, one could tell that they were in a state of passionate love. It was simply enviable. But the problem wasn't here. The problem wasn't the relationship between Ryuto and Dunya. After all, if this group of students remembered correctly, a similar situation should have happened a few months ago. A few months ago, the third-year school beauty, Yunyen Sakujiri, came to school with Ryuto's shoulder intimately. That time, it even caused a huge commotion in the school. After that, Yunyen also admitted that she was dating Ryuto. While breaking the hearts of many male and female students, everyone could only watch this beautiful senior being eaten by the demon king Ryuto. At this moment, just a few months later, a similar scene happened again. The man was still the same man, but the woman was no longer the same woman. The one who was hugged by the arm was still Ryuto Kiryu, but the one who was hugging his arm was Dunya Saito. What was this? Was this a joke? So when they saw Ryuto and Dunya walking intimately into the school gate, most of the students who saw this scene were dumbfounded. Logically speaking, Ryuto should be dating Yunyen now. In the past few months, they often saw them going out and going in and out together, so they were quite close. But early in the morning, he came to school with Dunya so intimately. Could this be the legendary cheating? For a moment, the entire Dori First High School was boiling again. The posts on the First High School BBS were like a storm, discussing the relationship between Dunya, Ryuto, and Yunyen. Some people said that Ryuto and Yunyen were a couple, and Dunya was the mistress. Some people said that Ryuto and Dunya were a couple, and that he had already broken up with Yunyen. Some people even said that Ryuto was two-timing, and that he was dating the two jokers at the same time. But no matter what, the three names that kept appearing on the First High School BBS forum and the students' mouths pulled the entire school into an epic love triangle. And at noon on the same day, on the rooftop of a school building, a never-before-seen luncheon slowly began. The host of the luncheon was Year 2 Class A's daughter, Colored Glaze Kanzaki. Currently, a few veins seemed to have appeared on her forehead, and her upright sitting posture seemed to be shaking. It was obvious that this daughter was in a very bad mood. Of course, apart from the host, Colored Glaze, there were 2 other people participating in this luncheon. They were Year 3 Class A's Yunyen Tsukujiri and Year 1 Class A's Dunya Sai 2. Just at noon today, Luli invited the 2 young ladies out for lunch at the same time, which was a rare occurrence. However, she had an ulterior motive. She obviously didn't intend to watch Dunya wolf down the food here. Dunya, who was being stared at by Colored Glaze with a strange gaze, put down the biscuit in her hand and smiled lightly. "Don't keep looking at me like that, Colored Glaze senpai. If you have something to say, just say it." "What's going on?" This girl seems to have undergone an obvious change. After feeling Dunya's calm temperament, Colored Glaze first frowned, then pretended to ask casually. "By the way, you went to Moscow with Ryuto a few days ago, right? How was the situation there?" "Ah, right, there's such a thing. What did you do in Moscow with Ryuto? I'm very curious." Hearing Colored Glaze's words, Yunyen suddenly remembered this matter, so she opened her eyes wide and looked at Dunya. After Dunya's coming-of-age ceremony, she and Ryuto directly flew to Moscow for a 4-day and 4-night tour. It was impossible to say that Colored Glaze and Yunyen didn't care about this situation. After all, the 2 of them had never traveled alone with Ryuto before. And outside of the tour, Dunya did not hesitate to do that intimate action in front of the entire school early in the morning, which made people wonder if she had undergone a strange change in mentality during the tour. However, when faced with the 2 eyes that clearly contained different complicated emotions, Dunya remained calm. Dunya, on the other hand, remained calm and collected. She even leisurely picked up a glass of vodka from the tablecloth. She put the glass to her rosy lips, took a small sip, then smiled. "We just went to Tomahawk to talk about business. Colored Glaze senpai, didn't you receive the news?" Now that Colored Glaze was the #1 strategist of the Black Hand Alliance, in theory, all the big and small information would go through her eyes. Naturally, she wouldn't miss the things that happened between Ryuto and Dunya in Moscow. "I do have some information, but other than that, I want to know how the 2 of you spent those few days in the same suite." Seeing that Dunya was still playing dumb in front of her, Colored Glaze finally asked in a displeased tone. Indeed, Colored Glaze knew too much, including the fact that Dunya and Ryuto stayed in the suite of the 4 Seasons Hotel in Moscow for 3 days. But after all, there were no surveillance cameras in the suite, so Colored Glaze couldn't figure out what happened between the 2 of them in the past few days. From Colored Glaze's point of view, Ryuto wouldn't go so far as to lay his hands on Dunya, who had the body of a child. That guy shouldn't be that thirsty. But it was necessary to clarify this matter, especially since Dunya had obviously changed. Otherwise, Colored Glaze and Yunyen would always have a thorn in their hearts. But when faced with this somewhat personal question, Dunya casually replied, "Are you sure you want me to answer? This answer might not be what you want to hear." "Not what I want to hear." "No way, right?" After hearing her words, Colored Glaze and Yunyen looked at each other and saw the disbelief in each other's eyes. "Dunya, don't keep us in suspense, just say it." At this time, Yunyen took the lead and continued to ask, her tone becoming slightly anxious. Originally, Yunyen didn't think too much about Dunya and Ryuto going on a trip, but now that they came back, the feeling that they gave off was getting more and more strange, which made it easy for people's imaginations to run wild. After all, this was Dunya, the usually coarse, rude, and violent silver bear that would explode at the slightest provocation. If it was the previous Dunya, facing Colored Glaze and Yunyen, she definitely wouldn't be so arrogant, as if she was the victor, but now she could. And if one looked closely, it wasn't difficult to notice that the girl's appearance and temperament seemed to be completely different from before. At this time, Yunyen glanced at Dunya's waterfall-like silver-white hair that was tied into a simple ponytail and then draped over her shoulders. This kind of mature and steady hairstyle usually appeared on married wives, even the more mature Yun Yen had a hard time with this kind of unique hairstyle. But now, Dunia was somehow able to pull it off. Mature, married wife, Dunia. These three words didn't have any sense of harmony in Colored Glaze's eyes. They were words that couldn't be put together at all. But in reality, even Colored Glaze had to admit that today, Dunia's temperament actually matched this kind of mature hairstyle very well. It was the most ridiculous thing in the world. Chapter 291. Dunia, Saitu Dunia, this stinky bare flat-chested brat actually exuded a graceful, gentle, steady, mature and elegant feminine aura. It was like seeing a ghost in broad daylight. When she went out, she was a bare brat, and when she came back, she became an elegant wife. The change in temperament wasn't something that could be achieved simply by changing her hairstyle and clothes. It can't be. Dunia. Could it be? She and Ryuto really. What's wrong? Colored Glaze. Senpai. Your expression is getting weirder and weirder. Just as Colored Glaze was thinking about the impossible answer in her heart, Dunia revealed a devilish smirk and said to Colored Glaze in a proud tone. For some reason, Dunia's body exuded a powerful aura. How should this aura be described? It was like a harem empress, managing the harem on behalf of the emperor. WH. What's going on? Why did she suddenly become so magnanimous? And what's with the arrogance and calmness of a victor? When Colored Glaze couldn't help but take a deep breath and wanted to get to the bottom of it, Dunia smiled. What are you smiling at? I'm smiling at how you have the guts to think nonsense, but don't have the guts to say it. Hearing this, Colored Glaze's body slightly stiffened. She didn't know if it was because Ryuto opened her governor and conception meridian, or if it was because she stepped onto the steps of an adult and became smarter. What was unexpected was that Dunia actually saw through Colored Glaze's thoughts. It felt as if a polar bear suddenly picked up a keyboard and started typing, and it was as ridiculous as Tokyo Villain's Love Game. For a moment, Colored Glaze was shocked speechless by this ridiculous change, and Union's gaze was also filled with suspicion. Okay, I'll confess. Being stared at by two pairs of obviously distrustful eyes, Dunia smiled and waved her hand, showing an I surrender look. Yun Yen also slightly sighed in relief and asked with a smile, why didn't you just say it earlier? What interesting thing did you encounter when you traveled with Ryuto? Tell me about it. It's nothing, it's just that I became an adult with him. What? When Dunia said those words in a light tone while drinking vodka, the surrounding air. I became an adult with him, together, that's all. It was a simple line of words, but it contained a lot of incredible information. After all, generally speaking, there were many ways to become adults. However, there was probably only one way for a man and a woman to become adults together. That way was stealing, eating, forbidden, fruit. In other words, Dunia's words meant that she and Ryuto already had a relationship, and it was a relationship between a man and a woman. In an instant, Colored Glaze was petrified, Yun Yen was stunned, and Dunia, on the other hand, puffed up her chest, put her hands on her waist, and put on the posture of a victor. How about it? Do you know what it means to overtake on a curve? No matter how far the two of you ran before, this young lady can directly pass by and leave you far behind. Thinking of this, Dunia's mouth curled up, and her expression was extremely cute. A while ago, she felt the same way when she saw Ryuto being intimate with Yun Yen and Colored Glaze. Now that the two behind her knew that she overtook them, she felt the same way. Perhaps even more so. She really got her revenge. How? How is that possible? I don't believe it. After a moment, Colored Glaze said in a low voice, with a look of disbelief. How is that possible? Why would Ryuto make a move on Dunia? If he made a move on Yun Yen, Colored Glaze could still understand. After all, Yun Yen was full of feminine charm. She was beautiful, had big breasts, a thin waist, a round butt, and long legs. It was normal for Ryuto to not be able to resist the temptation. But what the hell was Dunia? Apart from his face, this stinky brat had nothing else. How could she possibly be the first to take the lead? Something was wrong, right? You don't believe it, right? Dunia heard this and grinned. She took out her phone from her pocket and waved it at Colored Glaze. I have some photos here that can be used as evidence. Do you want to see them? Photos? Could it be those photos? In an instant, Colored Glaze and Yun Yen looked at the phone in Dunia's hand. Especially the former, her eyes were about to spit fire. Yun Yen, on the other hand, was much more open-minded. She quickly leaned over and put her head on Dunia's shoulder. She smiled and said, Aya, is it true? I really want to see it. If Yun Yen wants to see it, then it's definitely possible. Suddenly, Dunia narrowed her eyes and looked at Colored Glaze. Then, she swiped her phone and showed some of the strange photos she had recently collected. After seeing the photo, Yun Yen covered her mouth in surprise. Wow, that's amazing. Hee, amazing, right? There's even more amazing. Pfft. Ha ha ha. This photo of Ryuto's expression is a little funny. Indeed, that guy's expression is quite funny sometimes. It's easy to get out of character. Sigh, I'm so envious. Speaking of which, didn't you feel pain at that time? A little at first, but you'll get used to it. Besides, he's quite gentle. On the other side, Yun Yen and Dunia were laughing and looking at some strange photos, happily exchanging their experiences. On the other side, Colored Glaze was as uncomfortable as if she had eaten a fly. She raised the teacup with trembling hands and tried to pretend that she didn't care about the situation over there, but in fact, I want to see it, I want to see it, I want to see it so much. When the young miss of Kamiyoshi looked at the scene where the two were looking at the photos, her heart was already screaming crazily. How could she not care? After all, she had never done those things with Ryuto before. Not only did Dunia take the lead, she even took photos as a souvenir. It was simply it was too enviable. She cared so much about what was in those photos. However, although Colored Glaze really wanted to see the contents of those photos, she couldn't beg Dunia. After all, the two of them had always been on bad terms. Therefore, Colored Glaze, who was originally kneeling on the tablecloth, quietly moved her petite but slightly towards Dunia's direction. After moving a little, seeing that Dunia didn't respond, Colored Glaze began to move again, using her butt as a belt, and her waist as a belt to move her legs. Not long after, her body was getting closer and closer to Dunia's position, and the corner of her eyes could gradually see the light on the phone over there. I'm about to see it. Look. But at this moment, Dunia suddenly turned off the phone and smiled. Hey, I've seen enough. Let's continue eating. F***ck. In an instant, Colored Glaze almost fell to the side. She hurriedly held onto the tablecloth with her hand, supported her slender waist, and looked at Dunia with resentment. Colored Glaze, senpai, why are you looking at me like that? Don't tell me you want to see it too? After noticing the resentful gaze, Dunia pretended to widen her eyes in surprise, and said to Colored Glaze with a puzzled tone. However, the triumphant look on her face couldn't be concealed. That's right, Dunia was indeed the winner. After all, as an adult, there was a qualitative difference between her and Colored Glaze and Yun Yen. This wasn't something that could be made up by the difference in intelligence. Just like that, this rare three-person lunch ended with Dunia's victory. Lioli, on the other hand, angrily ran to Long Do's house after school and vented her anger on this bastard. She didn't leave until very late at night. As for how Colored Glaze kicked up a fuss, and how Ryuto comforted her, that was something that couldn't be said in detail. But that afternoon, when Yun Yen returned to Tsukuminari Kojo, an unexpected storm slowly blew in her house. When she returned to the living room, the first thing Yun Yen saw was her father sitting on the sofa. He didn't look too good, so she asked with a smile, Dad, why are you back so early today? Yun Yan's father, Tsukujiri Kyoji, was an elegant man with a scholarly aura. He had good facial features, wore square glasses, and always wore a decent white suit. He was the type that would attract attention wherever he went. Usually, Kyoji always had a gentle smile on his face as if he was a nice guy who would never get angry. But today, Kyoji wasn't like that. Yunyen, come sit here. After seeing his daughter, the CEO of Tsukuminari Group patted the sofa next to him and said in a tone that made people feel bad. This feeling? Father seems to want to scold me? Did I do something wrong recently? Since young, Kyoji rarely scolded Yunyen. After all, Yunyen, the daughter of the Tsukuminari Group, had always been very obedient. There was nothing to scold her about. But today, Kyoji was different. His face was serious, and his eyes were like lightning. His tone also sounded like he expected better from his daughter, as if he was very disappointed in her. So Yunyen deliberately sat opposite Kyoji and asked with a smile, "Dad, what's wrong today? Are you going to scold me? Take a look at this." The next moment, Kyoji took out a few photos from the folder beside him and threw them on the table between the two. This is... Oh, so that's what it is. Yunyen picked up the photo and looked at it. It was the scene of Ryuto and Dunya intimately holding each other's shoulders as they walked into the school. Now, Yunyen knew why her father was angry. It was because Kyoji already knew that his daughter was dating that extreme leader. But now, his daughter's boyfriend was being intimate with another woman in public. As a father-in-law, it would be strange if he wasn't angry. Chapter 292. But after looking at the photos, Yunyen said with a relaxed smile, "Dad, what are you trying to say by showing me these photos?" "What am I trying to say? Do you still need to ask? Break up with Ryuto Kiryu immediately." Seeing his daughter's relaxed expression, Kyoji's eyes became sharper. Actually, when he knew that his daughter was dating the second-generation leader of the Rulon Group, Kyoji's first reaction was to firmly oppose it. After all, Ryuto, that person. Almost all of Tokyo's residents knew that he wasn't a good person. Although the trip to the Kokyo unexpectedly gave him a lot of popularity, the upper class still didn't treat him as a decent person. Such an extreme dojo leader actually got his cute and generous daughter. When Kyoji heard the news, he was so angry that he almost wanted to find Ryuto and scold him, but Jinchin stopped her husband. "Don't worry, isn't Ryuto a good kid? What's wrong with him dating Yunyen?" "Yes. But that guy is extreme dojo. He's not a decent person." "So what if he's extreme dojo?" Mrs. Ruehue also praised him a lot. "Don't tell me you think you're as good at judging people as Ruehue?" After his wife used Ruehue to suppress him, Kyoji was immediately silenced. Kyoji himself was one of the 12 members of the Yatsuki Dark Crow, so he was naturally very familiar with the leader of the Kamiyoshi clan, and he also knew how powerful Ruehue was. If Ryuto was just an ordinary delinquent, then he definitely wouldn't have received Ruehue's approval, so he must have some outstanding strengths. As for what those strengths were, perhaps only Ruehue and Dunya knew. In this case, Kyoji could only acquiesce to his daughter's relationship with Ryuto. However, he also ordered Yunyen to go back to the Uejian villa every day to prevent his daughter from being taken away by that pig on a dark and windy night if he didn't keep a close eye on her. It had to be said that Gong Si had great foresight. Otherwise, with Yunyen's personality, she wouldn't have waited until now. Ryuto would have eaten her clean. Dunya wouldn't have had the chance to take the lead. But it was clear that although Kyoji could keep an eye on his daughter, he couldn't keep an eye on that bastard Ryuto. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that bastard to flirt with another woman while he was dating his own daughter. Moreover, the other party was the eldest daughter of the Saito family. This was simply outrageous. "Break up, we must break up." Therefore, when Yunyen came back tonight, Kyoji gave his daughter an absolute order to force her to break up with Ryuto no matter what. However, Yunyen lightly shook her head and said without a care, "Dad, you misunderstood. Actually, I know about him and Dunya." "What?" The moment he heard this, Kyoji was stunned. "Did I hear wrong? My daughter said that her boyfriend was flirting with another woman. She knew about it. And she was still so calm when she knew about it? After being stunned for a moment, Kyoji suspiciously asked. Then you… That's right, you don't actually like that delinquent, right? That's why you don't care about his cheating? No, I like Ryuto very much. Then if you like him, how can you tolerate him flirting outside? I like Ryuto, but I also like Dunya, what's wrong with that? This… After hearing Yunyen's overly provocative words, Kyoji couldn't help but widen his eyes as if he couldn't understand what the young people were thinking. Yunyen liked Ryuto, and also liked Dunya. Didn't that mean she was a double-edged sword? Just thinking about his daughter being entangled with a man and a woman, Kyoji almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Damn it! It must be that bastard Ryuto Kiryu who led my obedient daughter astray. I can't let Yunyen continue like this. At this time, Kyoji took a deep breath and said in a deep voice. We'll move abroad tomorrow. You should also prepare to transfer schools, you can't stay here anymore. Move. Transfer schools? Hearing her father's words, Yunyen finally realized that she was in big trouble. Kyoji seemed to be serious. In Kyoji's view, if his daughter continued like this, she would definitely become a hopeless woman, so he had to get her away from this terrible environment. Therefore, Kyoji decided to move immediately. He planned to take the whole family to a place where Ryuto Kiryu wouldn't be able to find them. Even if it was an uninhabited island, it would be better than staying in Tokyo. As for this sudden decision, Yunyen naturally couldn't accept it. She quickly stood up from the chair and shouted at her father. Wait. Wasn't this a little too presumptuous? I don't want to move, and I don't want to transfer schools. Shut up. If you weren't entangled with that hoodlum, I wouldn't be this angry. Ryuto isn't a hoodlum. He's my boyfriend. Please watch your words when you speak. Although Kyoji was obviously very angry, Yunyen wasn't to be outdone. Don't forget, Yunyen was originally the type with big guts. She dared to go out with Ryuto to watch a death match in the underground arena in the middle of the night. She even dared to sneak into someone's bed. Her guts were simply too big. Therefore, in this living room, Yunyen couldn't help but quarrel with her father. The father and daughter scolded louder and louder, and the more they scolded, the angrier they got. Now your wings have hardened, right? You dare to speak loudly to me? You can say whatever you want about me, but you can't scold Ryuto. He's innocent. He's innocent? That little bastard hugs women left and right, and he's innocent. Drag him out and hang him as a street lamp. You. If you say that again, I'm going to get angry. Tomorrow we'll transfer schools and move. I won't allow you to see that stinky hoodlum again. Oh. Transfer schools, right? Move, right? Wait and see. After hearing her father's resolute words, Yunyen couldn't help but clench her teeth. Then, without looking back, she ran out of the living room and ran towards her bedroom. Bang! While running back to her bedroom, Yunyen immediately locked the door from the inside. Then, she picked up her phone and called Ryuto. Beep 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 beep. Not long after, the phone was connected. Ryuto's familiar voice came from the other side. Yunyen? Calling at this time, do you want to? Without waiting for Ryuto to finish, Yunyen said in a serious tone, Father wants me to transfer schools tomorrow. Come pick me up immediately. I want to run away from home. Run away from home? No way, right? After hearing Yunyen's words, Ryuto was stunned. Because why does this plot sound a bit familiar? In the original Yunyen's timeline of Red Album 2, No Survivors, Miss Tsuchiki chose to run away from home because her family didn't allow her to be a full-time novelist and forced her to work at her own company. She took the main character and ran away overnight. And in this world, although the current Yunyen had yet to graduate, she seemed to have fallen out with her family because of the matter between her and him. In the end, she still made the same choice. It could only be said that as expected of the young mistress of the Pry family, she had to do the same in every world. But since Yunyen already said so, Ryuto immediately hung up the phone and called Narukai to drive to Tsuchiki Kojo. But when Ryuto arrived at the entrance of Tsuchiki Kojo, a few bodyguards quickly surrounded Ryuto and raised their hands. "Sorry, we won't be receiving any guests tonight. Please go back." "Not receiving guests tonight." Are they afraid that Yunyen will take the opportunity to run away? Seems like Kyoji didn't completely understand his daughter. After hearing the bodyguard's words, Ryuto revealed a slight smile and then suddenly disappeared from the spot. Almost in the blink of an eye, the bodyguards surrounding Long Do fell to the ground at the same time and lost consciousness one after another. They didn't even understand how they were put down. After all, to the current Ryuto, normal bodyguards were like non-existent. Even if there were 100 or 80 of them, they couldn't stop him. At this time, Kyoji, who was at home, received a message from the butler and knew that bastard Ryuto was about to break into the house. "Ryuto Kiryu? That guy dares to come?" Kyoji took a deep breath and shouted to the butler, "Let him go! Don't let that bastard step into the house." "Yes, I'll go mobilize." "Sorry, I'm already in." Just as the butler was about to mobilize more people to stop the Rulon group leader, a frivolous voice came from outside the living room. What? Under the stunned gaze of Kyoji and the butler, the young figure, Ryuto Kiryu, slowly appeared from the darkness and walked into the house with an indifferent expression. How is it possible? There are at least 30 to 40 bodyguards outside. Could it be that in such a short time, after feeling the gaze of the two, Ryuto walked toward Yunyen's room while smiling at his future father-in-law? "Don't look at me like that, I'll leave right away, I won't stay for too long." You're trespassing. Ahem. Originally, Kyoji wanted to yell at him, "You're trespassing." But then he realized that this guy was the leader of the extreme Dao. It would be strange if he cared about such a small thing. Damn it! This bastard! Seeing that Ryuto was about to walk toward Yunyen's room, Kyoji suddenly took out a button from his pocket and pressed it. Buzz. 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 Buzz, accompanied by a series of rapid buzzes, 5 multi-axis rotor microdrones, that were slightly larger than footballs, quickly flew in from outside the house and aimed their cannons at Long Do's body. When Ryuto first met Yunyen, she also used these drones once. It was a high-tech automatic defense system that Kyoji equipped for himself, his wife, and his daughter. Although the drones looked small, the small muzzle could fire hundreds of powerful tranquilizer bullets in a second. Even an elephant would be taken down in the blink of an eye. Whoosh! Bang! But before Kyoji could order the drones to attack, 5 small steel balls flew out like bullets. The 5 drones were smashed into smithereens. Chapter 293. Is this guy a human? Although Gong Si didn't practice martial arts, his eyesight was quite good. At that moment, he vaguely saw Long Do swinging his right hand without looking back. He directly threw out 5 steel balls from his hand and shot down 5 drones. Although they were miniature drones, the precision machines made by the Tsukujiri group could meet military standards in all aspects. Even if they were shot a few times, they might not fall, let alone be smashed with steel balls. In other words, the steel balls Ryuto threw out were more powerful than bullets? Isn't this nonsense? How can a human do this? If you have this ability, why don't you go fight monsters and save the world? However, just as Gong Si's face turned pale from the shock, Ryuto leisurely walked down the hallway and came to Yunyen's room. Knock knock. He elegantly knocked on the door and smiled. Yunyen? I'm here, open the door. Before he finished, the door opened and Yunyen's figure suddenly pounced on Ryuto. You're fast, let's go. After hugging her boyfriend, Yunyen rewarded him with a kiss on the cheek, then excitedly hugged Ryuto and walked out. Suddenly, Gong Si, who chased after them, saw his daughter hugging another man affectionately. He was so angry that he almost had a heart attack. Don't leave, little bastard. If you take her away, I'll... Sure. Long Do didn't wait for Gong Si to finish, and he made a shushing gesture. Those who threatened me before didn't have a good ending. You're my future father-in-law, I don't want you to end up like that. Otherwise, Yunyen will be sad. Ryuto's tone sounded very calm. It was far from a threat, but the threat was self-evident. The moment he heard these words, Kyoji felt a chill run down his spine, and a chill ran down his spine. It was hard to imagine that the CEO of a large conglomerate was scared to the point that his body trembled and he couldn't move. When Ryuto left with Yunyen, the butler who was standing on the side walked over with cold sweat and said to his master, "Kosha-sama, I'm sorry." "Sorry? What's the point of being sorry? What do I pay you for? To watch the show?" After seeing the butler who was said to be a spy, Gong-si couldn't help but yell at him in a harsh tone. Since Ryuto entered the room, the butler had been standing there motionless. People who didn't know him would think he was a block of wood. Tong Shang Ryukyu had come knocking on their door to take the young miss away, yet the butler, who was supposed to be her bodyguard, didn't do anything to stop him. Even if he couldn't stop him in the end, he still had to put up a front. Wasn't this professional ethics? Who knew that the butler shook his head and said, "It's not that I don't want to move, but if I move, I'll be beheaded on the spot. At that time, there'll be no turning back." What? Gong-si was shocked when he heard the butler's words. Although this sentence sounded a little unbelievable, it was the truth. In fact, the moment Long Do entered the room, the butler was already prepared to attack. He was ready to draw his gun from his waist. However, before he could pull out his gun, an aura akin to that of a death god locked him in place. "Don't move. If you pull out your gun, I'll kill you." Although Ryuto didn't say a word, his aura had already imprinted this sentence in the butler's mind. "We'll die. If I pull out my gun, I'll die here." Under this strong threat of death, the butler could only watch with cold sweat as Ryuto took the young lady away. Looking at the direction Ryuto left, the butler sighed and said, "Kosha-sama, that guy is a complete monster. There aren't many forces in this world that can stop him. It's better not to completely fall out with him." "What do you mean? You want me to watch my daughter be taken away by that bastard? What else? Does Kosha-sama want to pay with your life? Using your life in exchange for Miss Union's disgust and hatred towards him? It's not worth it." After hearing the butler's words, Gong-si didn't know how to react. Of course, in reality, Ryuto couldn't kill Gong-si. After all, he was his father-in-law. Even if he fell out with him, he would at most teach him a lesson. But the problem was that Gong-si and the butler didn't know this. They only felt that Ryuto was a monster. Too scary. Is this the leader of the Rulon Group and the Black Hand Alliance? Is this really a 16 or 17-year-old young man? Thinking of this, the president of the Tsukujiri Group couldn't help but take a deep breath. But at this time, Gong-si seemed to understand why his daughter liked Ryuto so much. After all, from the girl's point of view, the action of the leader rushing in to take away his girlfriend was very manly. It was much better than the boy toy in this era. But what should he do now? Yunyen ran away with that guy. Wasn't this sending a sheep to the tiger's mouth? At the thought that his daughter might be taken by a pig tonight, Gong-si's face turned into the color of pig liver. But even so, other than hurriedly contacting his acquaintances to call the police and think of a way to stop Long Do, he could only stay at home and silently pray that that bastard Long Do would not make a move on Yunyen so quickly. From a certain point of view, Gong-si's prayer was complete nonsense. Because what he didn't know was that his daughter wasn't a cabbage being taken by a pig, she was the one taking the initiative to take someone. Ha 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 ha. At the same time, in the back seat of the car with the Rulon Group's coat of arms, Yunyen was laughing happily. Ever since Long Do picked her up from her home, senior sister Yunyen had been very excited. At this time, she didn't even want to sit on Long Do's lap. She even reached out and hugged her boyfriend's neck. This extremely hot scene made the driver, Narukai, unable to stand it. He quickly pulled down the partition and put on his headphones. He made a, "I can't see anything, I can't hear anything" gesture. Seeing Yunyen's happy expression, Ryuto smiled and said to her, "Okay, now you've successfully run away from home, right? That's what you wanted." Long Do knew that senior sister Yunyen had always been the type who liked to take the initiative to pursue excitement. For her, running away from home with her boyfriend after quarreling with her father, this kind of incomparably exciting action obviously touched the young girl's nerves, making her so happy that she couldn't close her mouth. But when she heard Ryuto's words, Yunyen smiled in his ear and said, "Running away from home was successful, but it's not enough." "It's far from enough, I want more." "Oh. Then what do you want? Stay at my house for the night?" Ryuto said as he reached out and hugged his girlfriend's slender waist, and a hint of excitement flashed in his eyes. In fact, in the past few months, Yunyen had been firmly watched by Gong Si. Basically, she had no chance to have intimate contact with Ryuto, which made Ryuto feel particularly uncomfortable. Especially after eating dunya on this trip to Moscow, Ryuto was obviously looking forward to Yunyen. After all, even a flat loli like dunya could bring him so much joy. Yunyen, the type who had a good figure and knew how to play. It was really unbearable to think about. So on this night when Yunyen ran away from home, it was just right. Thinking of this, Ryuto's face couldn't help but show a weird expression, especially when he felt Yunyen's perky buttocks sitting on his lap. He was even more energetic. Yunyen's figure was excellent. She was the type who was not fat but had meat. The feeling of holding her was warm and soft. She was not on the same level as Dunya, who would touch his bones. He would definitely feel good. But just when Ryuto was imagining a strange scene in his mind, Yunyen in his arms shook her head and said, "It's not bad to stay at your house, but since I ran away from home, I want to go somewhere far away." "Somewhere far away? For example?" "For example, Paris, France? I want to see the Eiffel Tower with you and then kiss on the top of the tower." Should I say, as expected of Yunyen, this idea is really playful. Although it's a bit complicated. Go to Paris. It's not impossible under normal circumstances, but we definitely can't take a plane now. After hearing his girlfriend's request, Ryuto couldn't help but reach out and scratch his head. It could be foreseen that Tsukujiri Kyoji must be furious now because his daughter was taken away, and the police would arrest Ryuto for kidnapping. Although this crime would become a joke because of Yunyen's return, it also meant that Yunyen must take the initiative to go back, otherwise, it would not be a joke, and she would really be wanted by the police. In other words, before Yunyen went back, the two of them definitely couldn't take a civil plane to Paris, and this black car alone couldn't drive to Paris. But even so, even if there were such difficulties, Ryuto wanted to fulfill his girlfriend's wish as much as possible. So Ryuto nodded to Yunyen and smiled, "Wait a minute, let me make a call to confirm. If I remember correctly, Kai Yang seems to have something that can help. Let's ask him." Thinking of this, Ryuto dialed Kai Yang's mobile phone and asked if that thing was still in his hands. "That thing? No problem. Anyway, it's just there. You can come and drive it away." For Ryuto's request, Kai Yang didn't hesitate for a moment and directly told him that thing was now in the warehouse in the area. In this way, Ryuto quickly asked Narukai to drive in the direction Kai Yang said. It didn't take long for him to take Yunyen to a large warehouse near the remote seaside of Tokyo Bay. Parked in the center of the warehouse was a private jet that didn't look very big. It could seat 2 or 3 people at most. When she saw the plane, Yunyen suddenly covered her mouth with excitement because she didn't think that there was a self-driving tour to Paris. It was so exciting that this young lady was so excited that she couldn't even straighten her back. Chapter 294. Kai Yang's private jet was said to be a good thing he received from a fugitive warlord. It didn't cost much, but it was excellent. It was definitely worth it. Because of the omnipotent pilot passive skill of 100% proficiency, Ryuto could almost perfectly pilot all the vehicles in the world, so he got on the plane on the spot and flew all the way to the west with Yunyen. Boom. Boom 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 boom. As the jet ignited and quickly moved forward on the simple runway in front, it soared into the sky and soared in the dark night sky. Yunyen, sitting behind Ryuto, was unconsciously immersed in the beautiful night sky. Dusk shrouded the dusky Tokyo, and the dark sky was twinkling with sparkling diamond-like stars. Especially when sitting on this small jet, it was closer to the starry sky than sitting on a large passenger plane, as if the dazzling stars were within reach. It's so beautiful. Is this the feeling of flying in the sky? The surrounding night sky and clouds flashed behind quickly. To be honest, the feeling of riding this kind of jet was somewhat bumpy, but the surrounding stars quickly made Yun Yen addicted to it. Because it was already night, Yun Yen slowly fell asleep under the panoramic night sky unknowingly. Ah, it's really a perfect trip away from home. Before finally falling asleep, Yun Yen couldn't help but think so, and then she fell into a sweet dream. From Tokyo to Paris, even if it was a straight line, it was a long distance of more than 9,000 kilometers, and it had to pass through many countries. Fortunately, the jet provided by Kai Yang had all the necessary documents to fly in various countries, and he immediately used his own connections to ensure that Long Do would not be intercepted on the way to Paris. So after nearly 10 hours of flight and landing to refuel, when the next morning came, the plane was already parked in a manor on the outskirts of Paris. This manor was said to be the property of a Chinese Chamber of Commerce in Paris. Kai Yang, who had a lot of people, greeted the boss there and got permission to land, allowing Ryuto to temporarily park the plane there. Sway, sway. At this time, Yun Yen was still sleeping, but she suddenly felt that her body seemed to be floating, and then her surroundings began to shake slightly. What's going on? After an unknown amount of time, Yun Yen opened her eyes in a daze. Immediately after, an incomparably gorgeous scene appeared before the young girl's eyes. Although it was the beginning of winter in October, outside the window of Yun Yan's vision, a field of huge sunflowers was blooming like flames in the wilderness of Paris. The sunflowers seemed to be burning with life, setting off the beautiful and tranquil scenery of the lake and mountains not far away. Together with the faintly visible ancient and exquisite art buildings in the surrounding mountain villages, it looked even more fascinating under the morning sun. Oh, you're awake. When Yun Yen was unconsciously shocked by the beautiful scenery outside the window, a familiar voice came from the side. Yun Yen turned her head and saw Ryuto handing over a bottle of mineral water with a smile. Coincidentally, Yun Yen also felt thirsty at this time, so she took the bottle and drank. After drinking, Yun Yen found that the two were sitting in a luxurious car. The driver in front was a white-haired old gentleman. The car was driving on a neat, desolate mountain road, surrounded by beautiful natural scenery. Seeing Yun Yen woke up, the old gentleman in front turned his head slightly and greeted with a smile, "Bonjour, mademoiselle, good morning, miss." Because Yun Yen often traveled to and from different countries since she was young, she could speak most of the languages of many countries. Thus, she replied without hesitation, "Bonjour." Wait. Could it be? After saying bonjour, she realized that the old gentleman was actually speaking French to her. Could it be that he was speaking French? No way, right? Thinking of this, Yun Yen couldn't help but feel a little dreamy. She just ran away from home last night, and then said that she was running away from home to go to Paris with a hint of willfulness. As a result, she woke up in Paris? She was tens of thousands of miles away? Don't be surprised. We are indeed in France now, and we are rushing to the city of Paris. This is Mr. Bernard, the person responsible for receiving us. It seemed that he felt that Yun Yen's confused look was a little cute. Ryuto patted her head gently, and then introduced the old gentleman in front of him. Mr. Bernard was the old butler responsible for managing the manor where the plane was parked. Kai Yang asked the owner of the manor to take care of his friend, so Ryuto and Yun Yen were warmly entertained by the owner after they got off the plane. Originally, Ryuto just wanted to borrow a car from them and drive from the suburbs to Paris, but the old butler insisted on sending them, which led to the current scene. While the wheels were moving, it didn't take long for a city with a strong artistic atmosphere and rich life to slowly appear in front of Yun Yan's eyes. When it came to Paris, there was always a very strange feeling because there was always a feeling that time seemed to stop flowing here. People often praised the changes in emerging cities, but such changes absolutely did not exist in Paris. Those old and full of artistic buildings stood in the same place day after day, year after year. The historic Champs-Élysées, the white and sacred Arc de Triomphe, the magnificent Palace of Versailles, the elegant and dignified Notre Dame de Paris, the towering Eiffel Tower in the Square of the God of War, and the Seine River flowing quietly under the tower, all of them spoke of the charm of this city. When Ryuto entered the city, he felt the natural romantic sentiment of the French, as well as the spirit that somewhat confused the Orientals. The Orientals pursued the idea of man conquering nature. Even if there were thousands of huge waves, they would go against the current, like a fish leaping over the dragon gate to become a dragon. If they failed, they would die. But the French liked to go with the flow. Wherever the waves hit, people would lie there. Compared to going against the current, they obviously preferred to raise their hands. It didn't take long for the two to bid farewell to the enthusiastic old gentleman Bernard and stroll on the Champs-Élysées. It was early in the morning. Because they had been flying all night and hadn't eaten anything until now, Yunyan found that she was already dizzy from hunger. She pulled Ryuto to find a coffee shop and sat down outside. The outdoor coffee shops in Paris were very famous. Walking on the streets and alleys, one could see exquisite chairs placed outside, people sitting and drinking coffee while enjoying delicious food. However, because of the hunger, Yunyan didn't plan to choose carefully. After sitting down, she hurriedly ordered a few food and drinks, then held Ryuto's hand and waited for the food to arrive. Perhaps it was because the two were in the city of romance. Yunyan seemed to be cuter than usual after coming here, especially her little eyes looking into the shop, eager to see when her breakfast would be served. Ryuto couldn't stop looking at her. He wanted to hug her, pat her head, and pat her back. Fortunately, it didn't take long for the well-dressed waiter to serve the signature delicacies of the coffee shop. An apple pie with sea salt ice cream, an omelette egg, a raspberry Napoleon cake, a seafood sandwich, and a pot of hot chocolate. The omelette egg was wrapped with cheese, various vegetables, and ham. It was very refreshing to eat together with the salad that was served together. The combination of ice and fire of the apple pie and ice cream brought a strong stimulation when it entered the mouth, which was very much in line with Yunyan's preferences. I'm alive again. After sweeping almost all the things on the table, Yunyan stretched slightly, revealing her perfect body under the romantic and roguish sunshine of Paris. Seeing this scene, Ryuto felt energized and quickly asked, "Are we going to the Eiffel Tower now?" Because Yunyan previously said that she wanted to kiss on the Eiffel Tower, Ryuto was especially looking forward to this trip to the Eiffel Tower. When he thought about being intimate with senior sister Yunyan on a tower that was hundreds of meters high and overlooking the whole of Paris, his young and rogue little heart couldn't take it anymore. Unexpectedly, Yunyan shook her head and smiled. "It's better to go at night. I want to go to another place during the day." "Another place? Where? Louvre? Notre Dame de Paris?" No, those places are not interesting, and I was tired of going there when I was 5. This damned rich lady. After hearing Yunyan's Versailles words, Ryuto smiled bitterly. "Then aren't you used to coming to Paris? Where else do you want to go?" "Well, I won't be tired of going to that place no matter how many times I go, and that place is also the starting point of my dream." When she said the words, "starting point of my dream," Yunyan's face couldn't help but show a trace of longing. Dream. If Ryuto remembered correctly, Yunyan's dream should be to be a novelist, right? The starting point of a novelist's dream, what kind of place would that be? This special information, even in the original Red Album 2, No Survivors, was not announced. The players knew that Yunyan wanted to be a novelist, but they didn't know when and how she started to have this idea. After all, Yunyan was the young lady of a high-tech company, and she had a strong personal charm. How could this dream be related to novels? With the thought of wanting to know more about Yunyan, Ryuto followed Yunyan to the huge building on the west bank of the Seine River. French National Library. Chapter 295. The Bibliothèque Nationale de France was the largest library in France and one of the few large libraries in the world. This world-famous library was built on an industrial wasteland on the bank of the Seine River in Paris, forming the gorgeous scenery on the right bank of the Seine River. From the outside, the huge library was like 4 huge books that were opened, proudly standing under the clear sky, as if all the cultural crystallization of the world was stored in these 4 books. For most visitors or readers, their reading activities at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France began by reading these 4 huge books before entering the library. Of course, for Yunyan and Ryuto who came here after breakfast, this situation was no exception. Oh, what a big book! Are they not afraid of an earthquake collapsing it? After looking at the appearance of the library from the outside, Long Do thought of some very inauspicious things. Then, he followed Yunyan and walked into the library with great familiarity. The Bibliothèque Nationale de France covered a large area, and there were many books stored inside. At first glance, it felt like it was surrounded by a sea of books. After entering the library, Yunyan pulled Ryuto to a corner without hesitation. After walking for a while, they stopped in front of a bookshelf. At this time, Yunyan looked at the familiar bookshelf and books in front of her, and said to Ryuto without looking back, "Didn't I just say that this is the starting point of my dream?" Speaking of which, that was 5 years ago. The first time Yunyan had the idea of becoming a novelist, or rather an author, was when she came to the Bibliothèque Nationale de France with her mother when she was 12 years old, exactly 5 years ago. At that time, Yunyan was a girl who had no interest in literature. Compared to those thick books that didn't look fashionable at all, she preferred beautiful clothes or some rare toys. That's right, the Yunyan at that time did have such a side. She was also naughty, exaggerated, arrogant, proud, and willful. Because there was one thing that Yunyan was very clear about since she was a child, and that was that she was a person chosen by the heavens who could have everything without any effort. Indeed, Yunyan in Tsukujiri was a person chosen by the heavens. Among the billions of people in the world today, there were only a few people who could be compared to the top Miss of Versailles. If there was a word to describe Yunyan's background, then only the word cheat was the most appropriate word. As the Miss of the Tsukujiri group, Yunyan from the day she was born, she had endless wealth. In addition to this wealth, she also had a unique top beauty, a top figure, and extraordinary personal charm. This was especially true for her extraordinary charisma, which had been displayed since she was young. Ever since she was young, no matter what Yunyan did, she would always receive unreserved praise from others. Singing, dancing, tea ceremony, flower ceremony, recitation, drama. When a person has LV5 charm, her every move would naturally be able to shake people's hearts. Even if Yunyan's artistic talent was only at an average level, she would still be able to win the cheers of the audience. No matter what she did, there would be praise, and it would be praise from the bottom of her heart, not the kind that was superficial. From a certain point of view, level 5 charm was like a type of magic that could make people automatically submit to her, a type of magic that didn't require any effort to be praised. But as she grew older, this kind of special treatment finally made Yunyan feel a bit bored one day. Is there something wrong with my life? Is it really okay to continue like this? That year, when she was 12 years old, she couldn't help but think about it one night. No matter what Yunyan did, she could receive praise from others. No matter what she did, she could easily succeed. Was this kind of success that relied on God's gift of charm really her success? Yunyan thought about it for a long time, but she couldn't come up with an answer. Until one day during the holidays, she accompanied her mother to this French National Library. There, she saw her own path. Since the girl was 12 years old, it was the first time she saw such a big library, with so many different kinds of books. In the library, where the walls were carved with exquisite patterns, the rows of bookshelves were as long as the horizon, as if they were going to reach the clouds. Inside the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, there were more than 10 million books. The seemingly vast sea of books brought great shock to the 12-year-old Yunyan. The first thing that entered Yunyan's eyes were the millions of authors' names. On the rows of bookshelves, there were detailed records of countless authors' names. Europeans, Asians, Africans, Americans, contemporary people, modern people, ancient people, men, women, old people, children. In front of the sea of names in the books, many things didn't seem important. What kind of people were the authors of these books in the time period that they lived in? They were good people, bad people, scholars, ordinary people, poor, rich, in the flames of war, or ordinary people. This was the so-called appearance of life. But it didn't matter, no matter what they were like when they were alive, in the end, This group of people used the words that were passed down and obtained eternal life. A person's death was like an extinguished lamp, but as long as their words were passed down, their name, their spirit, and their ideals were passed down, it was equivalent to living in another form in history. When the 12-year-old Yun Yen looked at the rows of names on the bookshelves, she suddenly understood this principle. She couldn't help but shed tears of excitement. Yes, this is the path that I want to walk. No matter how good my family background is, no matter how beautiful my appearance is, no matter how amazing my charm is, all of these factors, both internal and external, will gradually disappear with the passage of time and the transformation of time and space. But no matter how much time passes, the words still have the power of a rock. Even if 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years have passed, it will still leave behind its own traces. I've decided, I want to be an author. I don't want to rely on Tianxi's family background, looks, and charm to live an ignoble life. I want to rely on my own abilities. I want to rely on the pen in my hand to let these words, clouds and geese in the moon, gain eternal life in the world of words. At that time, the 12-year-old Yun Yen stood in front of this row of bookshelves and made a vow of her life. 5 years later, the 17-year-old Yun Yen was still standing in the same place, looking at the same batch of books in front of her. It was as if her 17-year-old and 12-year-old self overlapped. But different from the 12-year-old Yun Yen, the current her had someone by her side who would unwaveringly support her no matter what. It sounds stupid. After describing her past, Yun Yen turned to Ryuto and said with a smile, "The young mistress who has everything from birth wants to take the most difficult path." "How could that be?" Long Do shook his head and said seriously, "It would be better to say, I have a feeling of respect for you now." This was not out of politeness, but Ryuto's praise from the bottom of his heart. Moreover, the reason for this praise had nothing to do with Yun Yen's extraordinary charm. Instead, it came from her noble and unyielding character. Just as Yun Yen had said, she was a woman who was destined to have everything from the day she was born. Her charm, beautiful appearance, and illustrious family background could only be described as invincible. It could allow her to live a carefree and colorful life, and she would be happier than anyone else in the world. Even so, she still took the initiative to choose the most difficult path. No matter how good Yun Yen's family background was, no matter how beautiful Yun Yen's appearance was, no matter how powerful Yun Yen's charm was, it had nothing to do with the words she wrote. On the path of writing, Yun Yen gave up all the advantages of her talent and built a bridge to her dream from scratch. Everything she did was to prove to the world that even if she did not rely on her family background, appearance, or charm, Yun Yen could still attract people's attention to her name. Ryuto felt that giving up her heaven-given ability for her dream was very noble. In Long Do's eyes, she had been working hard to realize her dream for the past few years, and her determination was extremely firm. Even at this moment, senior sister Yun Yen stood in front of the bookshelf and was surrounded by the vast and boundless books in front of her. There was a unique sense of beauty that Long Do had never seen before. It was a sense of beauty that seemed to be emitting the light of faith. "Hey! Is that so?" After being praised by Ryuto, Yun Yen felt a little embarrassed. But she quietly picked up her phone and stuffed it into Ryuto's arms. She said with a smile, "Since you're already in the library, why don't you take the opportunity to see if my novel has improved? How far is it from the group of great writers around me?" Okay, then I'll read your masterpiece and see when your book can be collected in this library." Ryuto took Yun Yen's phone and focused his attention. He carefully read the lines of words on the phone with the greatest enthusiasm. It was as if he was reading the Bible in his mind, solemn and serious. Unfortunately, in just 5 seconds, Ryuto regretted it. As he read Yun Yen's recent literary masterpiece, fine beads of sweat flowed down from his forehead. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and his body faintly trembled. How should he describe Yun Yen's book? After thinking for a moment, Ryuto handed the phone back to Yun Yen and said with a wry smile, "Not bad. As a light novel that's relaxing and funny, there should be bookstores that are willing to publish it." A light novel that's funny? However, Yun Yen frowned when she heard that. But my book's main theme is obviously a touching sadomasochistic plot. It's not relaxing at all, right? For a moment, the two of them looked at each other in the corner of the library, and the atmosphere was awkward. Chapter 296. However, although something awkward happened at the end of this supposedly heartwarming trip to the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, Ryuto and Yunyen still had a lot of fun during the day. After the two left the library, they went to the Seine River to enjoy the scenery of Paris on a boat. In the afternoon, they went to the famous shopping street to buy a lot of clothes and gifts. Finally, when the sun was about to set, they had a sumptuous dinner at the Le Petit Troquet, beside the Eiffel Tower. After dinner, the sky gradually became dark. Logically speaking, it was almost time to go to the Eiffel Tower. According to Yunyen's knowledge, the Eiffel Tower was open from 9:30 in the morning to 10:30 in the evening. If they went too late, they couldn't go up the tower and could only sightsee below. That would be too boring. However, Ryuto rejected the proposal to go directly to the Eiffel Tower after dinner. Instead, he mysteriously said to Yunyen, "Don't worry, it's boring to go too early. Let's go later." "Should I go there later? How late would it be? Don't tell me we'll wait until the elevator and stairs are closed before we go? Then how do we go up the tower?" At this time, Yunyen also couldn't guess Ryuto's thoughts. However, out of trust for her boyfriend, she continued to follow Ryuto on the streets of Paris. Just like this, the two watched a movie, went shopping, and sat in a dessert shop. Not long after, it was already close to 11 o'clock at night. Ah! The entrance of the Eiffel Tower is really closed. Now we can't go up. When Yunyen and Ryuto finally arrived at the bottom of the Eiffel Tower, the former looked at the closed elevator and stairs at the bottom of the tower. She couldn't help but show a helpless expression. The Eiffel Tower was a 300-meter tall steel tower. It was divided into 3 floors. The elevators located at the 4 pillars could reach the first, second, and third floors. If one took the stairs, they could only reach the first and second floors. But now, it was already past 10:30. Not to mention the elevator, even the stairs were gone. Yunyen could only stand on the ground and stare blankly at the huge shadow that was particularly conspicuous in the night sky. But at this moment, Ryuto smiled and said, "Don't be in such a hurry. At this time, the tourists and staff have basically all left. If we go up now, won't we be able to spend some quality time together? You have to be able to go up first." Yunyen pouted when she heard that. She pointed to the staircase and said, "Don't tell me you're planning to pry it open? I'll call the police." "Pry? I never said I was going to take the stairs or the elevator. Wasn't the outside of the Iron Tower empty? Why don't we just climb up?" "Climb? Climb up from the outside?" The moment she heard this sentence, Yunyen was petrified. In fact, because the Eiffel Tower was a special steel structure, it was not sealed with concrete. It did not take long for her to arrive at the highest point of the antenna tower. Standing at the top of the 324-meter-tall tower, looking down from this angle, she could completely overlook half of the night view of Paris. Of course, this was under the premise that she was not afraid of heights. Otherwise, just the flat steel bar structure without any protection around it was enough to scare a timid person to the point of fainting on the spot. Fortunately, Yunyen was a woman who had nothing to do with the word timid. "Wow! It's so beautiful!" Thus, after being carried to the top of the tower by Ryuto, she immediately looked at the night view of more than 300 meters high. The night in Paris was still flashing with neon lights and feasting. There were cars and people everywhere below, and a few planes flew over from time to time. But at the top of the Eiffel Tower, at the top of the 324-meter-tall antenna tower, was a private space that belonged only to Yunyen and Ryuto. After admiring the beautiful scenery for a while, Yunyen could not help but turn her head to look at Ryuto. At the same time, she reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. She smiled and said, "That's great. It's the best gift for leaving home." "Oh, is it?" Ryuto also smiled and said, "If that's the case, then what about it? What kind of gift are you going to give me in return?" "Well, then I'll give myself back to you as a gift. You have to accept it gently." Suddenly, Yunyen also slowly closed her gentle eyes, took the initiative to move forward, and pressed her cherry lips on Ryuto's mouth. In the early winter, the wind at 300 meters high was still somewhat cold, but the atmosphere at the top of the tower was particularly hot, as if even the frost was about to be melted by the passion of the two. After kissing for a long time, the blushing Yunyen took a deep breath and said emotionally, "Let's go down, it's getting late, we should find a place to rest." When the word rest was said, Yunyen felt her heart beat faster, and Ryuto felt the same. In the kiss and hug just now, the temperature of the two was constantly rising. Obviously, this kind of primary contact could not satisfy Yunyen now. She needed deeper and more intimate contact. Ryuto naturally understood Yunyen's meaning, so he also nodded. He hugged Yunyen's back with one hand and her slender legs with the other, and jumped down the tower without hesitation. Shwa! The next moment, a pair of hooligan gliders that hadn't been used for a long time spread out from Long Do's back. The two of them glided downwards under the night wind, until they landed on a street in an unknown corner of Paris. After ignoring the surrounding passers-by who were obviously frightened, Ryuto and Yunyen looked at each other and smiled. They began to look for a special building on both sides of the street. A hotel. Hotel, it was indeed a hotel. After all, it was almost midnight now, and it was time to find a place to rest. This was a very normal thing. As for whether they would do anything before resting, cough cough, that was hard to say. Perhaps the two of them would chat for a while, play poker, or something like that. After searching for a while, they finally found a decent hotel in the corner of the street. But before entering the hotel, Yunyen pointed at the shop next to her and said embarrassedly, why don't we buy something first?" "Buy something? What do you want to buy?" "It's that round thing." As Yunyen said, she gestured with her hand, but it could probably be understood what she wanted to buy. Unlike Dunia, who had no experience in this area and had no common sense, Yunyen knew what basic protective measures should be taken before that. Otherwise, if they accidentally hit the target the first time, they wouldn't be able to enjoy it for a long time. Thus, the two of them sneaked towards the store like thieves, preparing to buy some small props that young people would love to see. But just as Ryuto opened the door of the shop first, a beautiful woman with delicate facial features, tall and slender figure, who gave off a cold feeling, just happened to turn her head and look over there. "Huh. Wait. It's her." The moment he saw the beautiful woman, Ryuto's eyes suddenly widened. At the same time, Ryuto's old acquaintance who appeared here for some reason, the Metropolitan Police Department, Search Section 1 Chief, Tokushima Rinka, also showed a surprised expression. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.